critics never got it. Rolling Stone to this day still doesn't, but that's okay. I guess being accepted by aging hippies is not at the top of my priority list.
Kiss is a lifestyle, it's a force, it's a pack of dogs, it's whatever you want it to be.
You were the weirdo in school with your black nail polish? That's okay, because you believed in something. You knew something before they did.
You want to hate us, God love you. You want to love us, that's great too. If you're in the middle, get out.
Kiss might just be the most divisive band within all of rock history. The scorn they receive from latte-sipping hipsters is pretty evenly matched from the man-children out there you see that always find new and exciting ways to line the pockets of Gene Simmons. And I think I have a foot in both worlds. I grew up a massive fan of this band. There's old footage of me as a kid somewhere with a tennis racket rocking out to shout out loud, and I've wasted a lot of money on Kiss merch too. But in my teenage years, I went into a metamorphosis into the chai latte sipping hipster whose favorite band is The Replacements, who by the by had the best Black Diamond cover you'll ever hear. And I have not been shy about making my fair share of jokes at this band's expense. But it does come from a place of love. Who knows, I might have such a soft spot for Kiss now because they made some of the first music I ever heard. But all taste is dictated on your own personal experiences. You could say I only like The Replacements so much because I was depressed when I was 17. It's all about perspective. And sure, they're a gimmicky ass band, but so many noteworthy bands are gimmicky too. And if your favorite band are steadfast about their lack of a gimmick, then I hate to break it to you, buddy, but sometimes that lack of a gimmick is also a gimmick. And if you're a fan of bands like Dio, Megadeth, Motorhead, Overkill, Black Sabbath, and Iron Maiden slapping their iconography on shit to make a quick buck, then why are you blowing a gasket over Kiss dolls? You might say no one would care if it wasn't for the makeup, and that might be true to an extent, but the same thing goes for bands like Maiden and their mascot Eddie. But people still listen to their records. Kiss have tens of millions of monthly listeners on Spotify, and there's no pyro, explosions, lights, smoke, capes, blood, or makeup to bolster that number for them. I highly doubt people are pulling up Destroyer just to ogle at the pretty album cover. This band has some good stuff under their belt. So without any further ado, you wanted the best? You got some juice from NYC. This is the Kiss Retrospective. While there have been quite a few lineup changes over the years, the story of Kiss is by and large the story of two men, a legendary bromance made up of two people who apparently don't like each other that much.
What's the most unusual gift you've ever received?
A baby. Yeah, the imaginary baby. Obviously, you can always make up stories or tell things about women and rock and roll and partying.
Now, hold on 1 second. Cut this off for a second. Would you stop cutting me down in front of the camera? I don't go for that shit.
I wish the two of them would get together in a room and talk, since I know they don't talk to each other anymore and has not spoken to one another for quite a while.
The first of which was an Israeli immigrant born Chaim Witz, I believe it's pronounced, later changing his name to Gene Klein, also another very Jewish name, then later changing it a third and final time to Gene Simmons when Kiss actually formed. Maybe the most hated man within all of rock, and with Waste of Oxygen like Ted Nugent, G.G. Allen, Phil Spector, Jimmy Page, Steven Tyler, and goddamn Gary Glitter, that is quite an accomplishment. And honestly, I can't really bring myself to hate the guy, at least as much as everyone else does, for one reason and one reason only. He's very honest. He makes no qualms about the kind of guy he is. He called one of his solo albums Asshole. He knows what you think of him.
Gene's bark is a lot worse than his bite.
And honestly, it is quite inspirational to see the empire he built for himself as a poor-ass immigrant. I also really love his voice, his songwriting, he's a great performer, and I love his bass lines too. Honestly, as a bass player, he's so damn underrated. Obviously, he'll be the first to tell you that he's ripping off Paul McCartney every which way, but hey, if you're gonna rip anybody off, you may as well rip off the best. And his partner in crime since 1970 has been Paul Stanley, born Stanley Eisen. Probably my favorite member of the band. I think he's the best songwriter. His vocals are top tier. Say what you want about Kiss, but Paul Stanley was a world-class singer in his day. It's a shame what happened to his voice. His stage persona was also great. He played off Gene very well, being a bit more effeminate. His stage raps are lame as hell, but I'll let it slide. And honestly, he's maybe a little worse as a person than Gene is. His memoir is absolutely insufferable. Every hardship he or the band has ever gone through is everyone else's fault, and he can do no wrong.
They were demanding, quite honestly, that we play with the two original guys, Peter and Ace. So would give some people confusion, because if you saw people on stage who looked like Kiss but sounded like that, maybe we should be called Piss.
You're gonna kill your voice.
Also, shitting on a dead man who's not even there to defend himself? Stay classy, Paul. Paul and Gene met through a mutual friend named Steve Cornell. The less said about him, the better. Steve, Gene, and Paul formed a band called Wicked Lester in 1970. Steve left in 1971, but he still played on the still to this day unreleased Wicked Lester album, though it has since been leaked and bootlegged to the moon and back. It's a really odd listen, but I honestly really enjoy it. Incredibly eclectic stuff. Does not sound like Kiss at all, even when playing songs that Kiss would eventually perform themselves. Almost half of it is covers by the likes of Barry Mann, The Hollies. It's part rock, pop, folk, a little psychedelic at times. If you have an open mind, I would recommend giving it a listen, despite how scatterbrained it is.
It doesn't matter what you do or say. I know goodbye's coming any day. Keep me waiting. Keep me waiting.
Despite getting signed to Epic Records, the album was shelved, though it was almost released in the mid-70s to cash in on the Kiss craze, but the band brought the master tapes to stop that from happening and to keep their hard rock image intact, which is funny considering how the 70s ended for this band. It also included pictures of the band without makeup, so I can understand it, I guess. In 1973, Paul and Gene, dejected about the record being shelved, decided to form a new band in a more hard rock style, taking influence from the glam rock of bands like the New York Dolls. And it's a little funny how Gene and Paul will talk down on bands like the Dolls despite taking such obvious inspiration from them.
It seemed to be more a fashion show, and the music was the soundtrack to the fashion show.
Obviously, they copped to taking visual influence from them, but even musically, if you listen to the first 3 Kiss records and then the first 2 New York Dolls records, you can totally make the connection. It's a little ramshackle and very in-your-face music, but David Johansen's stage presence was incredibly effeminate and flamboyant, and knew how to make the girlie scream just like Paul did later. Arthur Killer Kane had a lot of cool moving bass lines throughout the songs like Gene did, and Johnny Thunders was basically Ace Frehley before Ace Frehley. Hell, Jerry Nolan and Peter Criss were childhood best friends. I'm not saying Kiss ripped him off wholesale or anything, but you'd be stupid to deny both the visual and the musical influence. Gene and Paul met Peter Criss, born George Peter John Criscola, first 3 names have an S. After seeing an ad he put for himself in Rolling Stone magazine, they met him in a nightclub where he was set to perform, and after hearing his jazz-influenced drumming and what Gene called his Wilson Pickett-style voice, he was recruited. And Peter gets a lot of crap, and some of it's deserved. He's definitely the Ringo of Kiss, but Ringo gets too much shit too if you ask me. He's an expert at playing to the song, playing relatively simple beats but with jazzy flourishes and swing-type flair that no one else could really replicate, despite his 2 replacements being technically better drummers. But technicality ain't everything, and goddamn, that voice of his is a classic. And the final piece of the puzzle was Paul Ace Frehley. He answered the ad the other 3 put in the Village Voice for guitarist wanted with flash and ability, and he walked in with 1 orange sneaker and 1 red sneaker, plugged into his amp, and immediately started wailing, totally interrupting Bob Kulick's audition that they were in the middle of, effectively taking the gig that most likely would have gone to Bob. And remember the Kulick name, it'll come back later. Ace got the job, and thank God he did. Paul and Gene were the businessmen and wrote the songs, but Ace and Peter gave them their hard rock edge. Ace's solos were like songs within songs. He always knew how to elevate the material. He may be a sloppy player all in all, but that's how I like my Ace Frehley. They gave themselves the name Kiss after Paul's suggestion, after Peter mentioned that he was in a band called Lips, and the simplicity of the name just stuck. Ace designed the original logo, and Paul later refined it a bit. And the S's in the logo sure look familiar. And Ace had a bit of a penchant for collecting Nazi memorabilia. It's a bit sus.
A little sus.
But Ace wasn't anti-Semitic. Why would he be in a band with 2 Jews to begin with? Also, Paul isn't exactly innocent either. Lol. In some places in Europe, they have an ultra logo because, you know. So in Germany, they're effectively called Kids, and they decided to don face paint to differentiate themselves from the glam bands because they just didn't look very good in drag. They each designed their own costumes and makeup based on their personality. Paul was the star and gave himself an excuse to be lazy with a simple design. Gene was super into comic books, so the demon was born from there.
Peter.
This was a glorified alley cat who did some hard living on the streets of New York. He felt like he had 9 lives, so he was the Catman. And Ace chose the Spaceman because he was super into drugs, but he was also super into space, often saying that he came from the planet Jendel. You know, with such personality-driven characters they all came up with, it would sure be a shame if they got some scabs to wear the makeup later on. And that would suck. They recorded a demo with legend Eddie Kramer, and in mid-October 1973, former TV producer Bill Aucoin saw the band and offered to be the band's manager. And Bill's boyfriend, Sean Delaney, set up a video camera and coached them on their live act, and set the building blocks for what would be their live show for decades to come. Bill Aucoin said to give him 2 weeks and that he would find them a record contract. And on the 1st of November that year, Kiss were the first signees to Neil Bogart's Casablanca Records.
Who dreamed this up, this getup?
We all did.
How many members in the
There are
group?
4 members. You know, your audience really looks appetizing.
Oh, really? Are you a bat?
Yes. Actually, what I am is evil incarnate. And some of those cheeks and necks look really good.
Would it be funny if under this he was just a nice Jewish boy?
You should only know.
Where are you?
I do. You can't hide the hook.
If you're feeling good, baby, if you're feeling nice, you know your man is working hard. He's worth a deuce.
Kiss's debut was a stone cold classic. It's by no means a masterpiece, but it's really impressive that on their first ever record, they had damn near all the pieces of the puzzle. A point of contention of this record, like with all the pre-Alive records, is the production, courtesy of Kenny Kerner and Richie Wise. It's clean and it's lacking the energy that can be heard on Alive, but a lot of that can be chalked up to this being their first ever record. According to Gene, it was recorded and mixed in about 3 weeks, though Wise says it was less than a fortnight, and it's got an in-your-face quality to it. It can be quite aggressive despite the clean sound. This is the sound of 4 New Yorkers who didn't give a damn of what you had to say. In fact, after the record release party, after the band's performance, Warner Brothers, Casablanca's distributor, was outraged after seeing the makeup in the stage show and ended the deal with Casablanca shortly after the album was released. Hell, their debut single was about talking your girlfriend into anal sex. This band gave no fucks. And what a song too. Nothing to Lose has infectious hooks, a honky-tonk piano, and such a killer bass line from Gene that he's playing while singing at the same time. Also with Peter scatting, with the subject matter that may not have been the best turn of phrase to use. The band was showing their influences on their sleeve with this record, quite literally. The record sleeve is a homage to With the Beatles. Speaking of which, I will never understand why they made Peter get his makeup done by a professional makeup artist with a totally different design while the rest of the guys just handled their own makeup. Drummers always get the short end of the stick. This album surprisingly has some kinda heavy moments, or at least heavy by 1974 standards, as long as you don't look over the pond and see what those guys in Black Sabbath were doing, I guess. Deuce is a romp and a half with nonsensical lyrics and a powerful chorus. It should have been the opening track. There's a reason why this has been their opener for so many live shows. But the actual opener, Strutter, is also fantastic. It's quintessential Paul Stanley. It's womanizing with a lot of attitude. I love the bluesy riffing Paul's doing, with Ace behind him pounding out power chords, and just letting them ring out in such a cool rock and roll way. And the band strikes every note in unison in the chorus. It's so damn mesmerizing. The original 4 guys complemented each other so well.
Everybody says she's looking good, and the lady knows it's understood.
Though this album is not without its flaws. There's 2 pretty big stinkers on this album, with a lame-ass love theme from Kiss, which at best is boring and really light in the loafers. It's derivative of the song Acrobat, which they used to do live, and that song is way better. Compare both of them, and which would you rather hear on a rock record? Yeah, I thought so. And Kiss in Time, a cover originally by Bobby Rydell, is also piss poor. The vocals and riffs are okay, I guess, but the chorus is ear-grating and about as hard-rocking as a Captain Tennille record. It wasn't even originally on the album. After the album initially came out and didn't sell shit, Neil Bogart forced them back in the studio to record it, and against the band's wishes, it ended up on later pressings. One of few examples where a rare and expensive edition of an album is so valued because it excludes material. And for good reason, this song sucks. Ace Frehley has one composition on this album, the hard-rocking Cold Gin. It's a mid-tempo classic that leaves a lot of room for the main riff and the vocals to breathe, while letting it go wild in the chorus thanks to Peter's fantastic fills. The band wanted Ace to sing it, but he was far too shy to even attempt it, so he gave it to the famously straight-edge Gene Simmons, which is an irony I thoroughly enjoy. 100,000 Years has a sense of scale with its lyrics about time and space travel. Very ironic that the very first space-based song on a Kiss record is not written by Ace. And the record ends with Black Diamond. I guess you could call it the epic of the record. Like with 100,000 Years, there's a sense of scale, from Paul's soft intro to Peter's batshit insane vocal performance in the rest of the song, and Ace's solo in the breakdown, and it even ends with a loud droning G-sharp chord that just slowly degrades over the course of like a minute. Obviously inspired by what the Beatles did in A Day in the Life and its final chord. The journey the song takes you on in just under 5 minutes is magnificent. Kiss is a hell of a way to begin a career. By no means perfect, but has such a goated track list that the flaws seem very secondary. It reads like a greatest hits compilation, but despite how much I and many other fans loved it, I mean even Gene says it's his favorite, this record didn't sell squat. They had a decent amount of publicity, they toured like madmen, and concert tickets sold well, they just couldn't make it translate into record sales. It initially sold less than 100,000 copies. Casablanca was losing money fast, so Neil Bogart and Bill Aucoin rushed them back into the studio the very same year to record their sophomore effort.
Hey, how you doing? Hope you're enjoying the video. It's brought to you by me, my Patreon, and YouTube memberships. For as little as $1.75 USD a month, you can support the channel, help me grow, and get benefits like content like this early, your name in videos, and even the occasional exclusive video. So check it out, and I thank you in advance. Enjoy the video.
There was Neil Bogart who had the idea, I want the drum riser to levitate. They went up maybe 6 feet, but nobody'd ever done that. Bill Aucoin said, you guys are doing a song called Firehouse. One of you guys has to spit fire.
Who wants to try?
Literally the very first show we did, my hair went up like a matchstick.
And the fans loved it.
Now, after a debut that had a less than satisfactory production and sound, you'd think their next attempt would sound better. Wishful thinking. This is by far the shoddiest production this band has ever had. It sounds like it was recorded in a Chuck E. Cheese ball pit. Very muddy, there's no clarity or sparkle, quite a far cry from the debut, which if anything is too clean sounding. Richie Wise took the blame for the sound, saying his mental health wasn't in a good place at the time, that the record took a backseat in his life. This album sounds like a mess, but I honestly fucking love it. I'll take a rock record sounding too dirty over too clean any day. This isn't ABBA. It's Kiss. ABBA comes later. The sonic inadequacies, if anything, make these songs sound better than if they were produced correctly. Take Going Blind off this record, for instance, the band's first ever ballad, but it's a dark ballad. It was written during the Wicked Lester sessions with a co-writing credit from Steve Coronel. It's a disturbed love song between a 93-year-old man and a teenage girl. And yeah, I know, stinky. But the disgust you feel from the age gap was intentional. The song doesn't lust after the girl. It's about the disintegration of the protagonist. It's supposed to be creepy and disturbing. We have a few more albums to go before Gene starts fetishizing teenage girls. The darkness presence may be thanks to the fact that this was recorded in Los Angeles, and being the mean New Yorkers that they were, they had no time for the West Coast or its bullshit. One of Paul's guitars also got stolen, so I doubt he was very happy about that. Speaking of Paul, he's kind of the weak link on this album. His contributions just don't really fit too well compared to Ace's or especially Gene's, which is odd because he's probably my favorite member and I usually prefer his songs. The Peter song but Paul written main line is too happy sounding and sticks out like a sore thumb. The title track is classic, but again, doesn't really fit too well. I personally prefer Rip and Destroy. Coming Home is a great song, but it's one of few examples where the dirgy production actually is a hindrance. Got to Choose is my favorite of his off this record. It shouldn't be the opener, Parasite would have worked far better, but the song is still a classic. I'm a big fan of Gene's very pronounced backing vocals. It gives a great sing-along vibe to it.
Come on and tell me if you're gonna go. Come on.
This album was probably their heaviest until the 80s. The dark production really beefs up the riffs on this thing, almost like a dark psych rock album. Ace's Parasite is chock full of blistering riffs with a hypnotic chorus. Watching You has a Sabbath-esque main riff. It's such a killer groove from Peter. Those stops in the chorus will make your heart skip a beat. I imagine it's a great song to get stoned to, and speaking of songs to get stoned to, another Stone Cold classic, Ace's composition, Strange Ways. It's doomy, and thanks to the sound of this record, it's maybe proto-sludge metal. The Melvins not only covered Going Blind, but Buzz Osborne and Kirk Weinstein from Crowbar have both discussed their admiration of this record.
Hotter Than Hell record now, I think it's a lot better than a lot of stuff that people are trying to do along those lines. It's inventive and strange and good brontosaurus rock, you know?
And Strange Ways has such a punishing, bone-crushing riff that you could totally connect to the work of bands like Crowbar or the Melvins. Peter's vocal performance is one of his best, and the shuffle-like beats work great against the wall of riffs surrounding it. And of course, Ace's solo is also one of his best.
Just wanna feel some more. Strange ways. Twisted ways. Strange ways.
Hotter Than Hell, much like the debut, is also a Stone Cold classic, but it took a little bit for it to attain that reputation. A lot of Kiss fans were just not fans of the sludge. Cowards. And I like it considerably better than the debut. And I love the debut. Even the less than stellar tracks are far better than trite like Kissing Time or the love theme from Kiss. But surprisingly, audiences in 1974 did not have time for this noisy ruckus. And like its predecessor, it barely sold anything. If anything, I think it did even worse. In fact, it did so bad that they were rushed right back into the studio.
By our third record, Casablanca was in deep trouble. We made 2 albums right away the first year, neither sold. The third album, Neil Bogart decided to jump on and produce it for us.
We were back in New York City and trying to cut costs where we could. If you look at Dress to Kill, the album cover, most of us didn't own suits, but Bill O'Coin, our manager, had closets full of suits. So we got suits from Bill, and I'm wearing my dad's shoes, because all my shoes at that point had 8-inch heels, and that's all I had.
Rock bottom. Girl, you know you ought to treat me good. Rock bottom. Oh, you never treat me like you should.
I'm gonna be honest here, Dress to Kill is honestly one of my lesser favorite Kiss records. It's not bad at all. It's got a lot of classic tracks, but they were really scraped from material here. This is the third record they recorded within less than a year and a half, and you can tell. Paul recalled a meeting with Bill O'Coin about recording a new album, and he was saying that he didn't feel inspired to write a whole new album so soon. And O'Coin said, "I'll show you the debt and that'll make you inspired." It's by a long way their shortest record, barely over half an hour, and even then they extended the silence in between tracks just to make it seem a little longer, and even the production. I can't quite explain it, but it just feels more held back. The darkness felt on Hotter Than Hell is nowhere to be found here. They had such little material, in fact, that they took some old Wicked Lester songs and spruced them up with the Kiss treatments, and while I like both the Kiss and the Wicked Lester versions of these songs, you can't beat the Kiss renditions. However, All I Can is an energetic bop, and is one of few times the production kind of works. The cowbell is also a nice touch, and She is definitely the heaviest this album has to offer. I would have loved to have heard this track on Hotter Than Hell, but this version is no slouch. The riffs are groovy, and they work so well against the vocal harmonies. In my opinion, this album is very bottom heavy. The first 4 songs are good and all, but it doesn't really get good until rock bottom. A great song that has a beautiful intro, written by Ace Frehley, I believe, that goes on a bit too long, frankly. Again, they didn't have much material to work with. Of course, Rock and Roll All Night is on this record, and I'm not sure if I'm just too burnt out on it, but I never really dug it all that much. But it's a huge hit for a reason. It encapsulates its era of music so well, with maybe the most earworm hook this band ever wrote. But my favorite single off this album is by far Come On and Love Me. The intro solo was actually Paul's doing, not Ace's, and it's probably his finest ever guitar work. Not to be outdone by Ace's own solo later on, which is also classic. There's hooks around every corner. I love Paul's lyrics and his wordplay, and you can feel a sense of desperation here because they're near the end of their rope, but goddamn, they could deliver like nobody's business.
Later, won't you take me down on my knees? You can do what you please. Come on and love me. Come on and love me. Come on and love me.
Just to Kill is a good record. I just hesitate to call it great. The second side is chock full of classic tracks, but the first 4 songs just leave me wanting. And I think it's no coincidence they rarely play any of these live. It did a little better sales-wise, but not better enough. They still couldn't sell records if their lives depended on it, but their live shows were a different story entirely. So let's break the rules a little bit and cover one of the all-time great live records. Bring on Kiss Alive.
When the first album didn't hit real big, we went, you don't like that? Here's another one. When the second one didn't do that great, we went, how about this one?
Nobody radio really gave a shit about the band. We were too loud or whatever, so housewives would probably get rattled by the guitars or whatever.
And we thought we were so big in terms of our reputation as a live act. Let's do an album that's more or less a souvenir of coming to see us.
Yeah, people shouting you, people shouting. I can't hear you. I wanna rock and roll all night.
By 1975, Kiss had established a pretty loyal cult following, just not cult enough to actually buy the records, but still. By this point, they already had the pyro, Gene breathing fire, spitting blood, Ace's smoking guitar, Peter's elevating drums, and Paul existing. But this was before touring was the main moneymaker for recording artists. Nowadays, you record an album so you have an excuse to tour, but back then, you toured to support the album. So Bogart, Aucoin, and Kiss thought it'd be a great idea to record a live record. The fact it would be much cheaper to record was a pretty good bonus. Problem was, Bogart was in legal and financial straits at the time and owed money to the mob, so Bill Aucoin funded the tour to record this record out of pocket. It was recorded over 4 nights and was stitched together by Eddie Kramer in post to give what you can easily consider the quintessential Kiss record. And goddamn, after listening to the first 3 records and enduring the production, despite liking the sound of them to an extent, listening to these songs with the correct energy and bite is amazing. Now I know you're all screaming at me about how it's so not live, dude. Actually, it's not really a live record. They recorded it in the studio and fixed it. Yes, it's doctored in the studio, and it's basically Eddie Kramer Frankensteining the perfect Kiss show, adding the best of all 4 nights. And he overdubs vocals that weren't sung perfectly into the microphone or in the correct key, missed marks, hell, even the audience sounds were edited to sound bigger.
I know. A finger too. What now?
Well, there's a classic example of, the Paul's just running around, jumping up to the microphone. He's not on mic correctly, so this will be an opportunity for us to fix this in the studio.
But I don't care. Eddie Kramer may have stitched together the perfect Kiss show, but the end result is the perfect Kiss show. How can you complain about that? Eddie Kramer said himself, who cares if it was overdubbed? The energy still comes through. It's an experience for anyone who couldn't see the band in their classic years. You could put this album on with a decent sound system or set of headphones, close your eyes, and you're there. Besides, most of the best live records were fixed in the studio. Judas Priest Unleashed in the East, Thin Lizzy Live and Dangerous, Blink-182's The Mark, Tom and Travis Show, fuck you, I like that album, you name it. But funnily enough, the drums on this thing, all live. Peter Criss was a far better drummer than most give him credit for.
big, booming, straight-on rock album, and it makes you vibrate in your stomach.
And sure, I could see a fake live record just not sitting well with some people. Rock and roll is supposed to be about integrity and all that shit, but in my opinion, some people just worry too much about that kind of stuff. At the end of the day, it just doesn't really matter. Who cares? But if you're in that camp, there's plenty of bootlegs out there if that's your interest. It may not be real, but neither is a film. I view live records in a similar vein. If you want to see something that really happened, then go watch a documentary or listen to a bootleg. Kiss Alive was the first time I can think of where a live record really made a band's career. See also Peter Frampton and Cheap Trick. This album did big numbers for them, it saved Casablanca from bankruptcy, and it's what made Rock and Roll All Night into the smash hit that everyone knows it as today. Sure, it was on Dress to Kill, but nobody bought that album. After the Alive tour, the band were not content about going back to the way they were, and they actually wanted to sell records, so bring on what everybody and their dad calls Kiss's finest hour.
Margaret, you haven't introduced me to your friends.
Oh, forgive me. This is Ace, this is Jean, this is Peter, and this is Paul.
Oh, I love a good religious group. I can take one look at you four, and I can tell you how you got your name and how you got your act. You had a fight, and your mother's told you to kiss and make up. And your makeup is something else. How long does it take you to put it on?
We don't wear makeup.
Tell me what I got to do. I got to get up. Everybody's gonna move their feet. Get down. Everybody's gonna leave their seat. You gotta lose your mind in Detroit, Rock City.
Destroyer is kind of the Kiss album, isn't it? It was the first album of theirs to have this sense of extravagance and scale to it. Bob Ezrin was tapped to produce this record, whom at the time was best known for producing most of Alice Cooper's records, and he was a great choice. He knew exactly how to push these guys. He was basically Sergeant Hartman from Full Metal Jacket. He wore a whistle around his neck to use to instill discipline. He would yell at the band if their playing wasn't up to snuff. He even at one point stopped the recording sessions to enroll the band into lessons to learn basic music theory. Ezrin also got them into using sound effects and doing weird stuff like with God of Thunder, the definitive Gene song that Gene didn't write, funnily enough. You can hear a demo of the song with Paul singing, and it's a bizarre thing to hear, but I'll be lying to say if I didn't dig it.
God of thunder and rock and roll.
This is the first time the band ever really tapped into the characters and the music itself. It's so heavy and creepy, and you can thank Bob Ezrin for that. It was his idea to slow the tempo down, to get Gene to sing it, to get his kids in the studio to record those creepy ass voices, and he added all that reverb to push the atmosphere over the top. There's also the intro to Turok City, which kind of tells the story of a guy working on his car or doing the dishes, take your pick.
The truck is reported to be uninjured.
Then driving in his car to Alive, and he even sings along to it poorly. We've all been there. Before being flattened like a pancake. It was written about a fan who died after being hit by a car outside the arena they were playing in Charlotte, not Detroit, but Charlotte Rock City honestly sounds like more of a porno than anything. Gene's R&B inspired bass lines and that dueling solo between Ace and Paul, written by Bob Ezrin, proved to everyone that Kiss was far more than just a wacky band who wore makeup. Shout Out Loud is an anthem and a half, and I like it far better than Rock and Roll All Night, honestly. I believe it's the first time we hear Gene and Paul trade vocals, and they complement each other so well. It pushes something that's quite simplistic to its core to something that's really special. Though my favorite song of this record is the more simplistic Do You Love Me? A song about having a hanger-on girlfriend and wondering if she really loves you. And the insecurity is honestly humbling for a band with egos you can see from space. But you can hear church bells at the end, so I guess it's a happy ending. And we can't forget that this is the song where Paul Stanley revealed the size of his dick.
You like my 7-inch leather heel.
Thanks, Paul. We all needed to know that. You might be thinking I'm sucking this album's dick for all it's worth, but I honestly think this album is a little overrated. Great Expectations is heinously anus. This kind of syrupy bullshit wouldn't be good enough for even the worst Disney film. And the lyrics are just so bizarre. It's written to be a love song of sorts, but it gets bizarrely sexual? Gene, there are children present, please. By far the worst thing they released in the 70s. I don't think they approached this level of bad again until the late 80s at least. I'm not kidding, I hate the song that much. I'm also not really huge on songs like Flaming Youth or Sweet Pain. They're by no means bad, they just kind of filler. And Rock and Roll Party just seems sort of pretentious. And I don't expect pretension from this band. And I usually hate calling things pretentious, but what the fuck is this bullshit? But surprisingly enough, the other ballad of this record is a far cry from Great Expectations. Peter Criss's Beth. It's a sweet love song that emphasizes with the wives of musicians who have to deal with their husbands barely being home and more than likely screwing other chicks. It was the first time Kiss ever approached a song like this so genuinely. Peter's performance is amazing and the arrangement from the New York Philharmonic Orchestra is beautiful. The rest of the band didn't think it stood a chance. Paul and Gene didn't even want it on the record. It was relegated to being a B-side to Detroit Rock City, but DJs started flipping the record over and playing Beth en masse, and it slowly became the band's highest charting hits ever, and had nothing to do with Paul or Gene. I hope that fact keeps him awake at night.
Just a few more hours, and I'll be right home to you. I think I hear them calling. Oh, Beth, what can I do? Beth, what can I do?
Destroyer is definitely a career highlight, don't get me wrong, but I don't think it's the best Kiss record like many others do. I would take the debut over it, Hotter Than Hell, and especially Alive if you want to count that. But it was still an incredible achievement. It's got a lot of the biggest hits, it was the first Kiss record to go platinum, but initially a lot of their fans complained. A lot. They didn't want Kiss to make these extravagant rock records when they got into band thanks to their raw and primal sound of the first few records and Alive. So the band listened to the complaints.
When somebody says to you, you're bigger than the Beatles in Japan, you go, yeah, thanks. Very nice, okay.
The Beatles held the record there for playing at a place called Budokan for like 4 nights, something like that. We came in and sold out 7 shows in advance.
The airport is mobbed, and it's absolute chaos.
We had 2 sets of limousines. Some fake guys in makeup got into one and drove off, and half the crowd followed them, and the rest all descended on us.
I must have been bug-eyed because Gene looked over at me and went, don't look scared.
Rock and Roll Over, you could easily say, is what the first 3 records should have been. It's got more simplistic and more primal written songs. In fact, many of them were originally written for Destroyer, before Bob Ezrin got them into playing with sound effects and orchestras. But Paul thought it was cowardly to immediately backtrack after trying something new just because a few vocal fans voiced their dissent. And they were quick about it too. It's wild to go back to the 70s and see how quick these bands could pump out records compared to the bands nowadays. There must have been a lot of cocaine involved. Eddie Kramer returned since he produced Alive, and that was a great choice. No one got them like he did. But they didn't completely throw out everything they learned from Bob Ezrin. Calling Dr. Love has some weird backing vocals that sound like something he would do, but it's got a raw feel of something from Alive, with that swagging riffs and Peter's groove, which is simple, but he's adding some spice to it by doing little hi-hat tricks throughout the song. I Want You is an amazing opener. It starts the record off with some clean chords and Paul crooning before absolutely blasting off with one of the most powerful songs this band ever did. It has such an aura. Ladies' Room is as catchy as it is ironic since Peter was recording his drums in the bathroom. And speaking of Peter, he sings a song with this album called Hard Luck Woman, obviously trying to piggyback off the success of Beth, but it didn't start out that way. Paul originally wrote the song to give to someone like Rod Stewart, but Gene and Eddie Kramer heard it and said it would fit Peter far better. And as much as I love Beth, I think I like this song better. It actually has the other guys playing on it, unlike Beth, so it feels more like a Kiss song. Paul and Ace's sweet jangly guitars coupled with Gene's walking bass line makes this song incredibly Beatles-esque. And Peter's vocals are great. He sings the lyrics like he wrote them himself. Hell, he sells the song far better than Paul can whenever he tries to sing it, and he wrote the damn song. That raspy voice of his gives the song such a comforting quality, like you're receiving a hug. If Rod Stewart had recorded the song, it probably would have been a smash and be played on classic rock radio to this very day, but Rod would not have brought a tenth of the sincerity that Peter did.
I really love you, I can't forget about you. You'll be a hard luck woman, baby, till you find your man.
There's some lamer cuts like See in Your Dreams, it's kind of whatever, and Baby Driver is kind of a mess, which makes sense because it was a song that Peter brought into the fold after Beth was a hit. Sure, he co-wrote Beth, but he co-wrote Beth. His friend Stan Penridge and Bob Ezrin also contributed to that song, and Bob Ezrin is a big reason why that song works. Paul is in top form in this record. Take Me is sleazy and delightful. Mr. Speed is a softer song, but the hooks and riffs more than make up for it, and Making Love closes the record in a powerful way. It feels like an exclamation point. It's my favorite kind of closer because it leaves you wanting more. Rock and Roll Over may have been a slightly cowardly excursion to make sure that they didn't alienate their fan base, but it's so well done that I have a hard time complaining. It has the raw power that you want from a Kiss record, but with enough studio flourishes to distinguish itself from Alive. I wonder where they'll take their sound from here.
I think Kiss is a lot more exciting than four slobs walking on stage who need a shave.
But what is the art form that is involved when you pretend to be vomiting blood on the stage? What is that? Who told you it was pretend?
There's an art to projecting a fantasy to 2 million people or 3 million people. There's an art to selling out halls, 20,000 seat halls every night. That in itself is an art.
You can argue that Love Gun is the best of both Kiss worlds. It has the grandiosity of Destroyer in its sound, but the writing can also evoke the rawness that this band's good name was built upon. Eddie Kramer once again returns and shows us all how it's done, and the guys are maybe at their best in terms of chemistry, despite how much they probably wanted to rip each other's heads off. And it lines up with how big the band were at this point. According to a Gallup poll around this time, Kiss were the most popular band in America. The record itself has a kind of majesty to it, even down to Ken Kelly's artwork. The same guy did Destroyer. This is probably the best album cover they ever had. Not my favorite, but it makes the band themselves look larger than life. Modern day superheroes. And it's an album where every member gets a chance to shine, especially Ace, who has his first ever lead vocal on a Kiss record. Shock Me comes from an experience where the band were in Florida on tour, and Ace electrocuted himself on an improperly grounded metal railing, and after being out for the count for like half an hour, he woke up and eventually finished the show like the Chad he is. Ace originally had Gene in mind to sing it, but Gene really pushed Ace to do it himself, and thank God for that. The rest was history, and man, I love Ace's vocals. Technically, he's kind of a terrible singer, but in a way that works. He has such a vibe to his voice and an aura of cool radiating off him. It's very punk rock in a way. The title track is maybe Paul's all-time best. It's such a powerful anthem. The chorus sounds like the gates of heaven opening. It paints such great pictures with words, but why is there a connection between Paul writing all-time classic songs and singing about his dick? I Stole Your Love is bombastic and has the best of raw and gritty Kiss from the first few albums and the spectacle they were known for later on. I never used to like Hooligan, but I've come around to it. It's so cheesy, but I love it for Peter's performance and the actually pretty witty lyrics. Like, it's dumb as all hell, but that's almost the point. Plastercaster is about a groupie that would use plaster to make molds of famous rock stars' dicks, like Jimi Hendrix famously, though Gene was not one of these people, and Cynthia Plastercaster has said so herself, but you can't deny the hooks and wordplay here. But I think my favorite song of this album is actually one of the deep cuts. Almost Human. Since Paul wrote God of Thunder, I guess this is Gene's take on writing a proper demon song, and that main riff evokes images of Tony Iommi, I swear. Batshit insane solo from Ace, the creepy background vocals, the conga drums, and Gene's awesome bass line that takes center stage in the song since guitars are more reserved. It makes the song sound so unique within the band's pantheon. It's got one of the best grooves this band ever had. Though unfortunately, I have some issues with this record. Got Love for Sale never really impressed me. Tomorrow and Tonight is a poor rewrite of Rock and Roll All Night. Then She Kissed Me is a mystifyingly stupid cover song that has very little reason to exist. And Jesus, we need to talk about Christine 16. Yes, it's catchy as the plague, and the solo, originally written by none other than Eddie Van Halen himself, is classic, but goddamn, the lyrics are really hard to defend, guys. I may have defended Going Blind, but that's because the vibe of that song is not really a love song. It sounds more creepy and downright disturbing than anything. And even if Gene didn't really mean it that way, I can at least use plausible deniability or death of the author. But this is just a song where the protagonist lusts after a 16-year-old girl. Going Blind was sludgy and doomy, but this is structured like a pop song from the 50s. The context is important, guys. And I'm sorry, but there's no defending these words. If you still like the song for its melodies, hooks, and instrumentation, have at it. I'm not judging you. But don't try and get on me or anybody else's ass for having a problem with a song about literally being a predator. Sure, it was a different time back then, and I understand that. These things should be considered, but that doesn't mean we have to be okay with it in the modern day. And look, I'm not trying to cancel Kiss or anything, but if it makes me woke to have a problem with a song that promotes pedophilia, so be it. So that was Love Gun. It's still a good record with lots of classics, but goddamn, some of these tracks are hard to overlook. But the good cuts make this album worth owning. This is also the last Kiss studio record to prominently feature Paul, Gene, Ace, and Peter. I mean, it was the end of an era, and since they had another 3 albums under their belt, they decided that they should do another live record.
When we first started, we were 4 idiots off the streets of New York who didn't have a clue.
Bill Aucoin was far ahead of us. It was his vision to merchandise the band.
This is Kiss. Put them in any crazy pose you want.
Kiss Your Face. Introducing Kiss Your Face Makeup. Kiss Your Face Makeup is from Remco. Yeah.
I thought it was cute. And then more and more cute things, I call them, starting to happen. And I realized that the band, this kick-ass band that came from the streets of New York, we lost our edge. We were becoming dolls.
Our mantra and our way of thinking was that you're not forcing anybody to have something. You're denying them if you don't give it to them.
Stole your love, stole your love. Ain't never gonna let you go. Stole your love, stole your love, stole your love.
Recorded at 3 cities and 2 countries, making this the first classic live record of the 70s to be recorded at Budokan. Take that, Cheap Trick. They decided to use only tracks from the records they made since the first live installment so they wouldn't redundantly redo songs that already exist in a live setting on wax, which is a great idea to give more recent songs a chance. And it would be really stupid if they stopped doing that on later live releases. And there's not much to say. If you like the first Alive, you'll like this one too. Eddie Kramer is back doing his thing, stitching together performances to give you the best of all the individual concerts. The man is simply the GOAT. But I do prefer the first Alive. Those songs really needed the kick in the gut, whereas the material from Destroyer onwards didn't really have that problem, so it feels less necessary. But if you hated Alive for being fake, if anything, it's even more fake now. Tomorrow Tonight and Hard Luck Woman were recorded during soundcheck with crowd noises added later on. You can even hear Paul singing background vocals with himself. You may call it fake, but I call it throwing your voice. And honestly, I can't let it bother me too much. I never even noticed these things until years down the line. It's still a classic record for most of the same reasons the first Alive was, but for some reason they decided for the 4th side of the record to be studio tracks. I don't know why, because there's still other tracks they could have recorded, but oh well. I'm honestly not huge on most of them. I like them enough, but they do come across as filler to me. Ace doesn't even play on most of them, Bob Kulick does, and that cover of Any Way You Want It just fucking sucks. But Ace's Rocket Ride is by far the best out of all of them. It's a stone cold classic. The phasing effects on the guitars makes it truly sound out of this world. And the writing about space while making connections about sex is about as subtle as being hit in the head with a frying pan, but it works so well. Ace got a taste of singing and he wanted more. He may not have had the world's best voice. In fact, he was the worst singer in Kiss by a wide margin, but he knew how to use it very well.
Baby wants it fast, baby wants a blast. She wants a rocket ride, she wants a rocket ride. Baby wants it fast, baby wants a blast. She wants a rocket ride, she wants a rocket ride.
After Alive 2, the band needed a break, and for some reason, the band's contract, they each had to make solo records, though Gene and Paul have said that the solo records were in effect to placate Ace and Peter, who weren't happy and wanted to leave the band and go solo.
Both Ace and Peter decided they were going to leave the band. We told them, I did, I know my conscience is clear. I said, don't do it. Get yourself straight. You can have a solo career, you can do whatever the hell you want. Stay in the band. And I said, we don't care, we're leaving. We're both going to go do a solo record now.
We figured, well, great. Do a solo album. We'll all do solo albums. We'll put covers on that unify them. We'll put Kiss in one corner. We'll dedicate the albums to each other.
and we'll all get our rocks off.
I'm inclined to believe it was the contracts though. So on the 18th of September, 1978, each member released a solo record, and I'm going to review all of them in the order of which I like from worst to best. And I warn you, my opinions are not shocking at all.
We had a levitating drum set.
Wait,
we were still doing
that
a 30.
Was funny. It would go up 6 feet, but there was like guys with ropes pulling it from falling over, pulling me up, you know. And if we didn't get the guys for that night, the drums weren't going up.
When we first started out, we used to play clubs, and the drums would go up, and Peter would be like this, and the ceiling would be getting lower and lower.
And I used to tell the guys, don't lift me anymore. They still keep going at it. It would go up like that.
And then
the drop would go up, the head start going up again, drop like it. And my heart would drop with it. And we, you know, we all felt for Peter.
Now, the Peter Criss solo album is a little controversial within the Kiss canon. It's not a rock record at all. This album showcases Peter's love of R&B and soul music, and it's not particularly good R&B and soul music. Now, looking at me, you may not think I'm qualified to critique an R&B record, and you're not wrong, but I do love my fair share of material from Michael Jackson, Prince, and Stevie Wonder, so it's not as if I don't have a taste for this kind of music. This record was just doomed to fail. The kids who bought this record in '78 wanted a record of hard-rocking cuts like Black Diamond, Strange Ways, and Hooligan, and maybe a few ballads here or there like Beth. But instead we got a record that sounds eerily similar to this new thing called disco. Every rocker's kryptonite. So the Kiss fans weren't gonna like it, and the fans of this kind of music weren't gonna buy any record with a Kiss logo on it. This is the only one of the 4 solo records to have 2 singles released from it, according to Paul, because Peter had a bitch fit after the first one bombed and demanded a second one, which then also promptly bombed. And the album is just a poor attempt to replicate artists that Peter loves. There's no hooks worth anything here, the production is painfully dated, and Peter is not a songwriter, as showcased in many of these songs originating from Peter's pre-Kiss band, Lips. There's a cover, and Sean Delaney had to come in and write a few songs because Peter not only couldn't write songs, but he barely had any material to begin with. Vinnie Poncia was a producer on this record, who previously worked with Ringo Starr, and Peter always felt a kinship with Ringo as they were both underestimated drummers, but this album unfortunately proves why Peter was underestimated.
No one wants to be Peter Criss, Lois, not even Peter Criss.
It's really not worth anybody's time unless you have a high tolerance for 70s dick cheese. If you want good music in this vein, then just listen to Stevie Wonder. And if you want good Peter material, then pick up any song he sang as a member of Kiss. These solo records are supposed to showcase the personalities of the band members, but this record goes against what everybody thought of Peter. He was a hard-rocking drummer from an awesome band with a kick-ass whiskey voice. No one knew him as a guy who poorly crooned on Motown scraps. Hell, due to a car accident he was in, he couldn't even play drums on all of it. What the fuck?
I succumbed to fame, but not with chemicals and alcohol, but with ego.
What a way to make a living.
Grand delusions of myself. Power, money, and girls. My ambitions grew bigger, my appetite grew more. If a day went by and I didn't have companionship, it was a disaster.
Now, there was a lot of expectations for Gene's solo album. This album cover was probably the best out of all of them. He is, for all intents and purposes, the face of Kiss, and it starts great with Radioactive. The intro is creepy as hell, and the song itself is groovy glam rock that you could see Mark Bolan sing. But it all goes out the window as soon as the second track starts. Then the album devolves into stiff and forgettable funk rockers and poor attempts of aping the Beatles, packed to the brim with corny-ass production, lame female backing vocals, and so many special guests, including, but not limited to, Joe Perry of Aerosmith, Bob Seger, Rick Nielsen of Cheap Trick, Jeff Baxter of Steely Dan and the Doobie Brothers, Helen Reddy, Donna Summer, Cher. It's a little fucking ridiculous. It leaves us with a hot mess of a record that lacks any kind of identity, despite the most famous member of the band being behind it. A lot of people say this is the worst out of all the solo albums, but I'll give it a leg up over Peter because it actually has a few decent cuts that I come back to every now and then. As mentioned, Radioactive is a banger, and See You Tonight is actually a pretty good attempt at writing a Paul McCartney-esque love song. It has a warm and welcoming atmosphere, and Gene's performance sounds genuine with really cool layered production.
I see you get it tonight. And if I can't, I'll cry and cry. You won't see me without it. And I'll see you tonight outside.
But this record is not worth it outside those few cuts. Again, it doesn't really showcase Gene's personality because he doesn't really play bass on any of it for no discernible reason, and it ends with a cover of When You Wish Upon a Star from Disney's Pinocchio. I understand the song was a big deal for Gene since it inspired him as a child to chase his dreams, and that's wholesome big chungus, but put yourself in the shoes of a 14-year-old boy who bought this record in 1978. If you see this album cover released by your favorite member of Kiss, do you expect this? Yeah, I thought so.
Hard life. It's not always this glamorous, but I enjoy it.
Paul Stanley's solo record is the first of these records to actually sound like what most people would expect, but that's almost the problem. It sounds too close to Kiss. It's almost redundant because there's not much reason to listen to this over a normal Kiss record, but with that being said, I would say that I like this album. Paul is on point despite his songwriting sounding a bit formulaic, but he actually wrote every track with no outside songwriters or covers, so you gotta give him that, I guess. Bob Kulick plays lead guitar and he's kind of doing an Ace type thing. Hold Me, Touch Me, Kiss Me, Kill Me, Thrill Me was a single and it sucks really bad. It's the most sappy and saccharine thing I've ever heard in my life. Move On was the song that Kiss played live on the Dynasty tour, and it's catchy enough, but a little basic. But what should have been the single is It's Alright. It's a romp and a half about a one-night stand, but with a more personal touch. This is a connection of sorts between the girl in the song and the protagonist. It's got Paul's signature sense of energy, he's really belting it out with everything he has, all with maybe the catchiest riff Paul ever wrote.
It's alright if you want me. It's alright if you need me. Girl, if you want me to stay for the night. Girl, if you want me to stay satisfied. Girl, if you want me to stay for the night. Well, it's alright.
I also like Love and Chains, Tonight You Belong to Me, and When You Like to Know Me. Just a lot of this record feels inessential. Like in even most of the tracks I like, I feel like there's something missing. Though surprisingly, Paul actually had a bit of an epic for him on this record. Take Me Away, Together as One. It feels very inspired by the AOR bands at the time. It's a little progressive and has a fantastic crescendo. It's the only example of this record where Paul takes advantage of this being a solo record and does something a little different. I honestly wish this album had more cuts like this and less shit like Hold Me, Touch Me. It's a good record, just not a great one, but unlike the last two records, I would actually recommend this one if it seems like it's up your alley, or if you're just a big Paul fan who for some reason has never heard it before. But I think we all know who had the best of the solo records.
I think this outfit is self-explanatory. I mean, you know, this is part of a kind of a V shape. This is my utility belt, and we don't want to go any below than my waist area, because that's reserved for concert payers.
But you're kind of like a spaceman, huh?
No, actually, I'm a plumber.
Everyone knows that this is by far the best one. In fact, I'm not sure if I trust you if you pick any of them over Ace's as your favorite. Sure, Paul's has its moments, but come on. Eddie Kramer is here, and thank God for that. Anton Fig, later of David Letterman fame, plays drums and he kills it, and Ace really let his personality out here. Everything from his musicianship, because he sings, plays all guitar and even most of the bass, and his sense of humor and his love of hard drugs. And my personal favorite track, Snowblind, is quite heavy with a great groove, courtesy of Anton Fig, and it's about... You know that Black Sabbath song from Volume 4, also called Snowblind? Yeah, it's not very subtle. And the song itself reflects this with its structure. The song is slow and slightly menacing throughout, but gets a rush of speed throughout the solo. And while I've never done cocaine, the song is how I imagine it feels like if you go too far with it, which according to many sources, Ace very much did at the time. But it isn't glorification of drug use if you actually listen to the lyrics. In fact, it's quite forward-thinking since Ace is singing about what very nearly took his life. Part of what makes this record so miraculous is that no one saw this coming. Ace was the fuck-up junkie. He may have helped give the band their rock edge, but he wasn't the songwriter that Paul or Gene was. In fact, Ace talks about how little faith Paul and Gene had in him to even make a solo album. During the meeting to discuss making all these solo records, they both went up to Ace and said, "Hey buddy, if you need any help, feel free to call us." And he sure as shit didn't. In fact, if you look at the personnel of the 78 solo albums, Ace was the one who needed the least amount of help. In fact, this is the only one of these albums to have a bona fide hit. Hold Me, Touch Me, and Radioactive charted within the top 50, but New York Groove made it to number 13, and it's still played on classic rock radio to this very day. Sure, it's a cover of a song that was already a hit in Europe, but Ace made the song considerably more popular, and today is the version that most people, if not everybody, knows. The original is by an English glam rock band called Hello, and was written by another Englishman, Russ Ballard of the band Argent, and with all due respect to the original, it's fine enough. This song does not sound right sung by someone not from NYC, let alone someone from a different continent altogether. Ada Kramer urged Ace to sing it, and despite his reluctance at first, he eventually did and made rock history. Once again, one of the biggest songs within the Kiss canon was not recorded with Gene or Paul at all. While Ace's album is by far the best of the solo records, it's fair to say that a big reason for this was because Ace was holding back a lot of his material back from being included on Kiss albums. In fact, he's admitted as much. Hell, Rock and Roll Over doesn't have any songs written by him at all. It's probably a good reason why Ace has never been able to repeat his success on this record with his later solo efforts. Now, I enjoy Space Invader, Frehley's Comet, and Trouble Walkin', but this album is just lightning in a bottle. Though then again, a lot of these songs just would not work in a Kiss context, so I guess it kinda makes sense why I kept them a secret. Ozone is a little psychedelic, What's on Your Mind is incredibly poppy, and Fractured Mirror is Fractured Mirror. A simply put transcendent instrumental that is so far beyond what the other guys were doing on their albums. There's so much audio texturing, the crescendo is unbelievable, and more than anything else Ace has ever done, it sounds like it came from outer space. Like if you put a microphone up to Saturn or Pluto, you'd probably hear something that sounds like this. Ace Frehley's 1978 solo album may not be a Kiss album, but I think it's even better. Every song is a Stone Cold classic, and the only other album we've discussed so far that I can also say that for is Alive 1, and maybe Hotter Than Hell depending on the day. For many years I called it my favorite album with the Kiss logo on it, and I'm not sure if I can still say that, but it's at the very least top 3. With these 9 cuts, Ace showed Gene and Paul that he was a formidable force in his own right. And even outside of Kiss, Ace has by far the best solo discography. Then again, with records like One For All, Live To Win, and Asshole, that's not a huge accomplishment in and of itself. Later in 1978, the Kiss movie was released, produced by Hanna-Barbera, and aired to NBC. Kiss Meets a Fan of the Park is a heinous piece of 80s dick cheese, but I love it. If you need a so bad it's good movie, then this is a pretty good one to check out. I mean, any film to get this reaction out of Rich Evans has to be amazing. This film was sold to Kiss as Star Wars meets A Hard Day's Night, but it's more like Plan 9 from Outer Space meets Alice in Wonderland. The guys in Kiss, to the shock of no one, are pretty awful actors.
No gratitude need be voiced. Your mind speaks to us. You're looking for someone, but it's not Kiss. We've got to get out of here.
Leave it to me, Star Child. I'll bend these beams with my mind.
Apparently they received a crash course in acting, but I think Peter spent more of his time being in actual car crashes since every line of his is ADR'd in post by voice actor Michael Bell.
Without them, no powers.
We're just ordinary human beings.
Run around crashing through the house. They're dressed. Yeah, I used to get the drag.
Gene and Paul say this is because
Peter
never showed up for post-production. Peter says he attended it, but the proof is in the pudding here.
A pussycat. Almost.
And speaking of ADR, it's really funny in this movie. Characters will be talking when their mouths aren't even open.
Sam, the talisman, they all led up to the park.
Especially what Melissa said about that Abner cat.
The general plot of the movie is about insane, evil scientist man, Abner Devereaux, who creates the world's worst animatronics of all time for Magic Mountain Theme Park, and after being fired, he takes it out on Kiss because he's anti-Semitic, I suppose. But he was already insane and kidnapping people before even being fired, so I don't think you could really blame his evilness on unemployment. He builds evil robot doppelgangers of Kiss that cause mayhem and perform a version of Hotter Than Hell called Rip and Destroy with the worst lyrics ever that aren't even sung in time.
It's time for everyone to listen good.
band all have stunt doubles used in their place at several points, mainly Ace because apparently he would disappear from the set for hours at a time, so they used his stunt double in more shots than they should have. This wouldn't be so bad if Ace's stunt double wasn't black. Ace changes race at several points in this movie, and it's so great. But he's not the only one guilty. Peter's just way taller than him and has a completely different build. Paul's double has this awful glued-on chest hair, and they're all used in places where the real guys could have easily been used instead. So I'm not sure if Ace can totally be blamed for this. Also, why was his stunt double black? Are you kidding me, man? That's some Black Dynamite shit. Kiss befriends a girl named Melissa, whose boyfriend is kidnapped and brainwashed by Abner Devereaux, and he's eventually saved after Kiss defeats Robo-Kiss and our villain just randomly dies for no reason. But earlier in the film, we meet Chopper, Slime, and my ex-girlfriend, I think. He kidnaps them as well and turns them into animatronics, but they're never brought up again after that. Are they just cursed to be shitty animatronics for the rest of the time? Kiss, save them, please! Oh man, I think she still has an old jacket of mine. Surprisingly enough, there's some kind of funny jokes.
Well, Gene, they think it was you. Think? It was him. Or his twin.
Gene's brother was an only child.
Now, I'm not sure if the jokes themselves are funny or if the guys are such bad actors that any dialogue coming out of their mouths will make me laugh.
Is there something wrong, Demon?
I'm not sure. Your fire signs worry too much.
Then again, even the dialogue from other characters played by real actors, I assume, have really funny deliveries.
If I hear demon one more time. I said monster, not demon. Same difference. Yeah, but you should see his feet. They've got eyes.
It's not essential bad movie viewing like Fateful Findings or something along those lines, but it's still really fun, even if a lot of your enjoyment rides on how big of a Kiss nerd you are. But in 1979, it was time for Kiss to get back to the saddle, and apparently it was also time for Kiss to find their groove thing.
I don't really think we made any drastic change. The song you're referring to as disco is really rock disco, but the majority of the album, I think, is rock still.
The whole idea for us was to do a song that fit the category and was still pretty true to what we do. It must have been the right move because it's either one or two around the world.
Music with a strong, danceable beat, you know, is really popular now, so...
It's still rock and roll.
But it's still rock and roll, in my opinion.
Oh boy, the dreaded Kiss disco album. Kissco, if you will. The butt of the joke for many detractors of this band. I remembered one time in a comment section, I tried to urge people to actually listen to Creatures of the Night if they think that Kiss sucks, and some guy who's about as funny as a children's cancer ward retorted with, "Oh, is that their disco album?" And so it remains to this day, even all these years removed from the inevitable disco backlash. The Disco Demolition Nights were a bit harsh to a retort of a bunch of dance records, and maybe it's a tad bigoted. I mean, it's a genre made famous by black and gay people, and women really liked it. I don't know. But at the time, disco was fucking everywhere, and if you're a 12-year-old boy in 1979 being forced to endure a genre that you hate so much, the news of your favorite rock band indulging in it can be a real hard pill to swallow.
Disco's so fucking big right now, I wouldn't be surprised if Kiss did a disco song sometime.
Oh, yeah. Man, if it's one thing Kiss will never do, it's a bullshit disco song.
No shit, man.
Yeah, man. Disco blows dogs for quarters, man.
And despite still largely having the taste of a 12-year-old boy, I like this album, guys. I'm really sorry. Other than I Was Made for Loving You, there's still plenty of hard rock, just with slicker production and dancier elements. You could argue this is one of the first ever dance rock records. Eat your heart out, Stone Roses. Magic Touch hits the best middle ground of the rock stars they once were and the pop stars they'd become. There's a lot of great guitar work from Paul, not Ace, funnily enough. His voice is on fire and the production is perfect. The band thought that the solo albums would help the band's tensions, but Paul said it was very much like putting a band-aid on a gaping wound. Peter forced the rest of the band into using Vinnie Poncia, the guy who produced his solo album, as the producer for Dynasty. Peter said this backfired on him because Paul poisoned Vinnie against him Sure thing, Peter. Vinnie said his drumming just wasn't up to snuff, which I'm inclined to agree. I mean, I wasn't there, so I wouldn't know for sure. And to be fair, Peter was in a car accident the year previous, but Peter's drumming in general kind of went to shit after Love Gun. I'm not sure if you can blame one car accident on that. Anton Fig from Ace's solo album played drums on this album, with the exception of Peter's Dirty Living. Though according to some people, Anton also played drums on the song. I don't know. It's also very dancey, disco-y, but with a definite rock edge. Ace's solo is amazing, Gene's walking bass line is as catchy as the vocals, and Peter's drums, or Anton's drums, give the song a right kind of groove. This is what Peter's solo album should have sounded like. The big hit, I Was Made for Loving You, was the end result of Paul going to Studio 54 and thinking, damn, this shit is easy to write. And he went back to his apartment and wrote one of their biggest hits.
I thought to myself, it's going to be easier to get a hit with something like this than anything else. This you can write in your sleep.
And while it's a lesser favorite of mine, I still really like it. It's clear that as skewed of a perspective Paul had on disco, he and co-writers Vinnie Poncia and Desmond Child understood the genre far more than other rock artists who dove into the disco money train like the Rolling Stones, Rod Stewart, and Alice Cooper. They knew the song had to be tight as a drum and the lyrics had to be about the here and now, along with some classic Kiss-isms like Paul's usual vocals, Ace's guitar, and Gene's. Well, Gene actually goes back and forth as to whether or not he played on the song, but whatever. But the other single, Sure Knows Something, is probably my favorite. As a kid, it was my all-time favorite Kiss song. Again, it's a good mixture of disco and hard rock, this time in a more soft, almost ballad type form. It has a more mellow vibe with the best bass Gene has ever had on a Kiss song. The main bass riff is so iconic. It sticks to usual patterns, but it just hits so right, you know? And even if you hate songs like Magic Touch for its flirtations with disco, then just listen to Ace's songs because they're still pure hard rocking Ace. He plays all the bass and guitars and sings on them, and with Anton Fig returning, we got more songs within the vein of Ace's solo album. In fact, with Ace's 3 songs, he even outshines Gene, who only has 2 songs. And while I like Charisma and X-Ray Eyes a lot,
we were subjected to disco and all kinds of crap, and it was the Village People, and it was anybody who wore a white suit and had Vinny as their name. Yo, the fuck, hey! And it was like, GOODNIGHT.
There's a reason why Ace was given more of a chance to shine. 2000 Man was another great cover from Ace, originally done by the Stones, and despite it being a cover, Ace sells these lyrics far better than Jagger ever did. Ace is just way more of a weirdo, you know what I mean? Hard Times harkens back to Ace's youth and early life growing up in the Bronx and being in gangs and all that stuff, with a pretty heavy chorus and neat drum fills from Anton Fig, and the final track, Save Your Love, is about sending a chick to Dumpsville. It's quite pathetic because this was right before the collapse of the original lineup, and when you read the lyrics of the song, it fits perfectly. It's a hard-hitting cut that has Paul doing some backing vocals, which makes it feel more Kiss than an Ace solo cut. It evokes the early material from this band in a really cool way, since this pretty much was the end. I've gotten a lot of shit for my love of Dynasty, but remember, it's all about timing. This album was on my iPod back in the day, it was on my cheap MP3 players before I owned my first iPod. My parents played it a lot. Hell, I even have the poster that came with the original vinyl here somewhere. Sure, it's disco, sure, it's pop, but Kiss were sellouts from the get-go. They were never doing a whole lot unique, at least musically. They borrowed from the Stones, the Dolls, the Beatles, Slade, Bowie, Alice Cooper, you name it. Sure, I Was Made for Loving You may be a far cry from songs like Deuce and Cold Gin, but so was Beth. Kiss are perpetual sellouts. The sooner you come to peace with this, the happier you'll be. Just enjoy the music on its own merits. If it sucks, then criticize it. But if you like it, then just enjoy the tunes, man. Though as much as I love this album, and I Was Made for Loving You was a huge hit for them, it was the first point that Kiss's popularity kind of started to stagnate. They canceled a lot of dates on the Dynasty tour due to low ticket sales, and the audiences that did came weren't the burnouts in the bleachers. They were families. When mom and dad come to a rock show in the 70s, then something has gone seriously wrong. I mean, look at their stage costumes. It's way too Vegas and loud. With each of them wearing their primary colors, it's like the Wiggles. Wait a minute, it's the same colors as the Wiggles too! A lot can be blamed for Kiss's downfall of popularity in the late 70s, early 80s. Some say disco, the chasing trends, the original lineup dissolving, Ace and Peter being Ace and Peter, those things did not help. But if you want to blame something, I'd blame overexposure. Kiss were fucking everywhere. Kiss records, Kiss lunchboxes, Kiss action figures, Kiss comic books, makeup sets, feature films. In the 70s alone, there were 7 studio records, 4 solo albums, 2 live records, a compilation album. I honestly have to blame Bill O'Coin and Paul and Gene for this one, honestly. It doesn't matter how much you think people love Kiss. Eventually, they will get sick of you if you market the band to such an extent. But with the Dynasty tour being called The Return of Kiss, are you kidding me? You guys only took 1 year off! During this period, the band did the Tom Snyder program, which is classic. Paul and Gene are super snooty and up their own ass, and they showed up drunk and talked mad shit, cracking jokes, and even getting Snyder to laugh himself silly.
I mean, when you realize that a lot of the people at the show have been waiting 3 or 4 months to come see us, and this is like the big night for them. And when you see all these people screaming and crying and all that,
Screaming and crying. Why did I spend all that money?
Oh, what people think is funny, that's really sad. Nah, fuck you guys. Ace was rock and roll and he made no reservations. In a weird way, he was being really defiant. I doubt he meant it that way, but still, I mean, just look at Paul and Gene, what bitter pricks. Dynasty did a lot of damage to Kiss's image. But could it be salvaged? Considering right before the next record was released, Peter Criss was fired? Unlikely.
Turn around. Look, it's rock and roll. Hello, Australia. This is Gene Simmons of Kiss, and I'd like to introduce you to
Paul Stanley of Kiss, who wants to introduce you to Ace Frehley of Kiss. What's the name of the new drummer?
All right, I think his name is his name is oh, wait a minute, I remember. His name is Eric Carr, and he's incredible.
Okay.
Now get out of here. Eric was so good. I mean, for the first week, though, he did have to wear diapers.
The band has never sounded tighter. I think I fit in really well with the guys. And, you know, if you come to the show, you'll hear it.
And will you still be doing what you're doing at the age of 40?
Well, who knows? What will you be doing at the age of 40?
Unmasked is alright. Not great, nowhere near as good as Dynasty, but it's alright. But it's definitely the last wheel, so to speak, to fall off the Kiss train. Despite being credited initially, Peter did not play on this album at all. Once again, it was Anton Fig, and Peter was kicked out due to his playing and just not being up to snuff. His drug problems were out of control, and his ability to work with others was non-existent. There's a lot of stories of Peter stopping songs mid-set during the Dynasty tour and throwing his sticks at the band. Safe to say, he was not long for this group. Anton Fig was asked to join for 1 day before the offer was rescinded.
He was thrilled. He couldn't sleep all night. The next day, Paul and Jim calls me and says, I don't think Anton's a good choice. So I had to do the dirty work, call back Anton and tell him, sorry, Anton, you're not in the band.
That kinda sucks. And they got Paul Caravello, later rechristened Eric Carr, who's my favorite Kiss drummer. His ability to make the drum set sound like a harmonious thunderstorm is unmatched, but I'll talk more about Eric later. Oh yeah, I forgot, aren't I supposed to review this album? There's no disco on this album, but it's very poppy. Many tracks will take influence from bands like The Cars, Cheap Trick, and other power pop acts. The lead single, Shandy, is a fantastic ballad, a little bit bubblegum, but not in a bad way. I love the guitar licks all throughout, acting as exclamation points to the vocal hooks. Songs like this prove that Paul can write some pretty great leads on occasion. This video is famous for being the last time Peter ever played in the band. He was already out by this point, but he was asked to be in the video, and he accepted. And like at the end of the video, they got out of their makeup and costumes, and Peter said he was the last to leave, and he sat in the dressing room and cried. It was simply put the end of an era. I listened to this record quite a bit as a kid, not quite as much as Dynasty, but a lot. I also had it on my iPods and whatnot, so I may have a bit of a soft spot for it, but even I can see the downgrade. For being a power pop record, it's quite restrained and held back. There's not much power behind it. Even Ace's songs aren't much to shake a stick at, if I'm honest. Talk to Me, I like enough. Two Sides to the Coin is okay, but it inspired that really lame-ass podcast. And So Peter Girl is just outright bad. Hurts for me to say that's being the Ace fanboy I am, but it just not good. The riffs are kinda neat, but the hooks are as blunt and mushy as an ice cream cone. It's just a jumbled mess. The song Tomorrow is one of the few songs where I feel some actual power behind this pop. The drums in the intro hit like cannons, and Paul surprisingly can pull off a song this far better than the other two. The chorus has these really cool sounding keys, the arrangement is really great. Sure, it's cheesy with the hand claps and all, but who cares? Paul really carries this album. Ace's tracks are whatever, and Gene's aren't much better either. On Dynasty, he also had the weaker compositions, but they're at least still good enough. But here we have shit like You're All That I Want, which is forgettable as hell, and She's So European, which is weird on top of just being bad. This is a song I could hear the Archies doing, but even Gene has a bright spot on this album. Naked City, co-written by Bob Kulick. It's solidly reggae-ish in the verses, it gives me Roxanne by the Police vibes. It's inspired by the old police procedural show of the same name from the 50s and 60s, and evokes images of crime noirs in the seedy side of New York. Overall, Unmasked has a lot of highlights, but a lot of duds too. It's a very mixed bag, like this fucking album cover. Sure, it looks good as a vinyl record,
but it won't look good when it's shrunk down for a CD.
And even with Peter being out of the band, they were still fractured. Nobody played on Paul's songs, the other guys didn't play on Ace's songs. It just sounds like a toxic environment to be creative and work in. And we're left with a record that can be a little bit toxic to the ear as well. And it continued the pattern of diminishing returns. The album went gold, not platinum, it didn't really have any hits, but that was in the States. The Unmasked tour was the first time Kiss played in countries such as New Zealand, Australia, and all across Europe where they were still huge, and Shandy was a big hit in Australia. I heard it all the time growing up. They only played one show in the US, which should have been a bad sign. But the tour was a success, and the fans immediately latched onto Eric Carr and his persona as the Fox. He gave the band the right kick in the ass that they needed, and the band were in good spirits. For the next album, they wanted to go back to their roots with a hard rock record like Destroyer, so they got Bob Ezrin back into the fold, but that was until Bob saw the short story that Gene was writing and said, "Hey, do you know Pink Floyd?"
Well, this album is a group of songs that are taken from the story of the Elder, and they're telling part of the story.
And the story is about a boy.
About a boy, a very special boy.
Very special boy.
Like the worm to a butterfly, we should simply change form and go on endlessly through the Milky Way.
Oh dear, Kiss may be a controversial band at the best of times, but even within Kiss circles, this record isn't just controversial, it's reviled. And you can see why. Kiss was a band about good times and making good kick-ass rock and roll. So them attempting a prog, art rock project mainly for the approval of critics, people who didn't like them to begin with, was not a good idea. They totally lost sight of who they were, but I'll be honest, I kinda love this album.
Move this man!
It's so bizarre and weird, and the story is hard to follow and generic at the same time, but it's just got something to it, you know what I mean? And I don't really like prog rock at all. I hate most Pink Floyd, Genesis is one of my least favorite bands of all time, and my favorite Rush record is Permanent Waves. Again, it comes down to nostalgia. I remember listening to this record in the dark on my iPod when I was like 12, and it kind of blew my mind. It's not Kiss at all, but it's a good record. And I'm not the first to say this, but if this record was as big as The Wall, then you know for sure that Gene and Paul would do tours for it like Roger Waters does. And despite this story being kind of a generic chosen one fantasy story, they paint pictures with words with the instrumentation and the lyrics, honestly. I'm a big nerd when it comes to this sort of stuff. I may be lost story-wise, but when Under the Rose comes on, written by Gene and new recruit Eric Carr, who did not gel with this concept at all and told the band as much, pretty ballsy for a guy who just joined the band, he still helped craft this mystical song with an odd time signature. It's in 6/8 and it has these huge groin sounding chants and it totally envelops the listener. Despite how messy the story is, you understand almost everything in that chorus. Another member who disliked this concept was Ace Frehley. He, more than anyone else, wants to go back to the hard rock direction, but since Peter left and Eric was basically a salaried employee, he was often outvoted 2-1. So remember when you read Paul's book and how he blames Gene and Bob about the Elder being made, he had the power to veto this idea if he wanted to, but he didn't. The record was recorded in Canada and Ace was there for a little bit, but he soon went back to his home studio and literally mailed in his guitar parts, but to his credit, he still contributed a decent amount.
Ace was amazing on the record, even though he didn't like it.
Ace's solos all throughout are amazing. We have the kick-ass instrumental written by Ace, Bob Ezrin, and Eric Carr, and Darklight written by Ace, Anton Fig, Gene, and Lou fucking Reed. Let me repeat that. Lou, Metal Machine Music, Reed. writing on a Kiss record? Did he owe money to Bob Ezrin or something? I have no understanding of how this could have happened. I would love to see the reaction of hipsters at this time if they found out that Lou Reed wrote songs for Kiss. But honestly, it's great. He wrote the lyrics and they're weird in a way that totally fits the project. And I never thought about this, but Ace kind of has a similar way of singing compared to Reed, being that they're both singers who can't sing. And that batshit insane solo from Ace was such a great way for him to say goodbye to this band.
A dark light, the darkness never ending, a dark light, the sun is turning cool, a dark night is everywhere descending, a dark light is shining at you.
The reason for it failing so bad at first was the piss poor attempt at sticking to the concept. The label decided to jumble up the track listing, and the record started with the heavy metal classic, in my opinion, The Oath, instead of fucking Fanfare when The Oath was originally on side 2. This might have seemed like a good idea from the outside, but that's like reading chapters of a book out of order, and the story itself needed all it could get. It's not Tolkien, it's not Frank Herbert, it's not Robert Jordan. I would hesitate to call it as good as Terry Goodkind. It's a by the numbers chosen one story, but this was supposed to be a big franchise like The Wall with a film and sequels that continue the story, but oops, we never got any of that. So the story is not only not great, but it doesn't even have an ending. It ends on a cliffhanger.
Morpheus, you have been summoned here to offer your judgment of the boy. Do you still deem him worthy of the fellowship?
At least Fellowship of the Ring is engaging all the way throughout, and it can be digested on its own if you want, but there's even a cover on this record. This is a concept record. Why are you recording covers? The one kind of popular song with this album is A World Without Heroes. They performed it on the Unplugged record, and there was even a video. Gene cries in it. It's kind of funny.
This is us being very artsy. This is a beautiful videotape of a wonderful song.
And you're going to
Notice at the end, Gene cries, and nobody has cried on anything of this sort since that Indian, when the kids throw the garbage and the guy sitting on. Oh, you haven't been in the audience.
It's a slow ballad with some amazing symphonic arrangements done by Michael Kamen. Gene surprisingly sells the pain performance, and Paul actually has an amazing guitar solo, very David Gilmour inspired.
Where you don't know what you're after, or if something's after you, and you don't know why you don't know.
As ridiculous as this record is, even with the screwball cheese thrown in and the proggy songwriting seemingly being antithetical to what I like in music, it's just so weird at the end of the day, and I like weird music. I can totally see why people hate it, but it's such a fun nugget of early 80s dick cheese that I can't help but really enjoy it. I don't know why either. I should probably hate this. The band hated it too. Ace said he threw the CD out of his car when he first heard it, even though CDs weren't a commercially available product in 1981, but it seems to have softened in time.
It's a good record. I don't think it's a bad record. I just think it was the wrong record at the wrong time.
The label forced the band to record some new material for a greatest hits package called Killers. They specified they wanted hard rock songs and not whatever the fuck The Elder was supposed to be. Ace had no involvements in the new songs, and Bob Kulick played lead guitar, and those 4 new songs aren't very good. Besides Nowhere to Run, they just kind of suck. Not killer at all. But Ace was in a bad way with his addictions, and he hated doing The Elder so much that he basically left. But their label signed Gene, Paul, and Ace. So they begged Ace to at least pretend to be in the band for the next record for promos and stuff, but Ace was having panic attacks and eventually just had to walk away. So despite Ace being on the album cover and in the videos, in the studio it was just Paul, Gene, Eric, and a bunch of session guys, including a guy named Vinnie Cusano, later taking the name of Vinnie Vincent.
You gotta be proud of who you are. We're a heavy metal band and we're real proud of it, and that's what we are.
I lost 10 pounds though, so I'm not that heavy anymore.
Only the desperate danger, 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 the pleasure and pain, boiling the blood in my veins.
Creatures of the Night is my favorite Kiss record. I remember first seeing this record and I just knew I needed to hear it. I had a Kiss Best Of compilation as a kid, and that was this big collage under the CD itself of all the albums up until that point, and the cover from Creatures of the Night had this just aura to it, and I couldn't take my eyes off it. I don't really know why either. Maybe it was just because it was blue and that's my favorite color. I don't know. But my dad bought me the CD, and when I took it home and put it into the boombox and heard Eric Carr unleashing thunder with his drums, I I knew I found something special. This is unlike any Kiss I had heard up until that point. It was a monolithic slab of heavy metal. The production was perfect, the guitars were nice and crunchy, there's a lot of reverb to sell the atmosphere, but not too much for anything to get lost in translation. Paul and Gene's vocals were maybe at their peak, and those drums, oh, those lovely drums. Producer Michael James Jackson and engineer Nicky Bolas did some black magic to that kit, man, I don't even know. Including, but not limited to, sending the sound of the drums through an abandoned elevator shaft with microphones at the other end of it to get that natural reverb. It's simply put insane. Also, let's not forget that Eric Carr is maybe the hardest hitting drummer this side of the Mississippi. You can't just engineer what isn't there in the studio. He and his drumsticks had a magic touch. This album alone is why he's my favorite Kiss drummer. I love Peter, and Eric Singer has his moments, but what Eric Carr did on this album is simply put untouchable. I Love It Loud was the lead single. It still has an anthemic quality to it, with those drums being the focus, but with one of the most simple yet best hooks they ever had. Couple this with some kick-ass lyrics and it proves that Kiss weren't dead just yet. Kiss were basically a trio of Gene, Paul, and Eric, with the best session musicians they could find to fill the shoes of Ace, including Steve Ferris and Robin Ford, but Vinnie Vincent plays on about half the record and co-writes 3 songs. If anybody's lead guitarist you can point to, it's him. There's a reason why he was chosen to eventually fill out the lead guitar position in Kiss for the following tour and the next record. He's an incredible writer and musician in general. Many say he saved Kiss, and I'm not sure if you can thank him alone with Kiss getting back on track, but you can't deny he was a vital piece of the puzzle. Sure, Vinny's a world-class asshole. He's a serial scammer. Where are those box sets, Vinny? But when he was in Kiss and Paul and Gene were reining in the wannabe Yngwie within him, he was the best guitarist they had since Ace. His solos and riffs are amazing, and he had a real personality to his playing and writing. The 3 songs he co-wrote, one being the before-mentioned I Love It Loud, the rocking Killer, and the ballad I Still Love You, prove this. It's a power ballad with some real power behind it. It's very dark. It's not the kind of power ballad you later hear on MTV in the 80s, even the ones done by Kiss. You can tell that Paul based these lyrics around a real breakup he was going through, and it's genuine, especially compared to the other power ballads of the 80s that were probably written because of contractual obligations. Also, fun fact, that's Eric Carr playing bass. I know it's slightly ironic for me to be dressed the way I was at the start of this video and Hail Creatures of the Night is my favorite, but according to Michael James Jackson, Ace did play a little here or there on this record, so take that as you will. Ace has been surprisingly very kind to this record.
If we wouldn't have done The Elder and would have done Creatures of the Night in place of The Elder, I may not have quit the band.
There's a song on this album that Kiss fans have speculated is about Ace himself. Rock and Roll Hell. The lyrics do the talking. It's about a rock and roll outlaw. And I don't know how else to describe Ace. It was co-written by some outside songwriters, Jim Valance, and a young up-and-comer, Bryan Adams. I'm not kidding. And Ace recorded his own version of it on his Origins Volume 1 covers record in 2016, and his version's not bad either. I wonder if he even knows it's probably about him. I have 2 favorite songs of this record, and it's the bookends. The opener, the title track Creatures of the Night. The atmosphere is best felt here with Paul's searing vocals and metallic riffs, and the closer War Machine has riffed from the bowels of hell. It's super simple but so powerful with a commanding presence that demands your utmost attention. It slithers throughout the song like a snake. It's got this tempo to it that's impeccable. Vinny's solo is slightly wanky but fits the song like a glove, and the slightly frantic solo in front of a simple riff really works. And Gene's performance is menacing in the best possible way. It's funny how Gene went on to act in the 80s and play all these shitty villains when his most villainous performance is in songs like this. Absolute classic, and definitely my favorite out of Gene's character songs. Creatures of the Night is, simply put, a masterpiece. Even lesser tracks like Saint and Sinner are still great. It's a hot slab of heavy metal that any metalhead worth their salt should have in their collection. This record proved that Kiss weren't just yesterday's shock rock band, and I don't trust any Kiss fans who write off everything without the original lineup when records like this exist, which, let's be honest, totally destroys a lot of the 70s stuff. Sorry, facts don't care about your feelings. But as awesome as it was, it alone was not enough to save the band. They dug themselves into a pretty big hole with their recent output. At first, sales-wise, it did even worse than The Elder. Their US tour was an unmitigated disaster. The booking agents wanted to put them into larger clubs and smaller theaters to sell them out easier, but the band only wants to play arenas, and they paid the price.
Kiss was supposed to play Providence this weekend, but not enough tickets sold and the concert was canceled.
Creatures of the Night tour was perhaps the most thinly attended since we began.
I just remember going on stage and the curtain would drop and there was nobody out there. And I'd be like this and pointing, and there's empty seats.
We can laugh about it now, but it was not a fun time.
Paul had a personal anecdote of throwing out guitar picks into the crowd and it landing behind the audience. The contract required Ace to still be in the band, so despite Vinnie, for all intents and purposes, joining the band as the Ankh Warrior, new guitar player, Ace was seen in promotional pictures for the tour, and the band would, on the day of the shows, put out PSAs that Ace was in a car accident or he was sick so he couldn't make the show, so this Vinnie Vincent guy would be playing instead. Of the few who actually bought tickets, I imagine very few of them actually knew that Ace wasn't in the band anymore. Anybody who's actually there back then, feel free to correct me. And it's a bit of a shame because the Creatures tour was fantastic. Eric and Vinnie transformed the band into a well-oiled machine, and Eric's drum set was this huge tank which the band would ride and would shoot out fireworks, which I just wish I could have seen it. Just like on the Unmasked tour, the band did far better outside the US. They played the biggest shows of their career in South America, playing to audiences of over 100,000 people, but the writing was on the wall. They needed to shake up and they needed it yesterday. They were no longer the band they were in the beginning, so why front? Gene and Paul blamed the downfall almost exclusively on Vinnie and Eric and new makeup. Never mind the fact that the fans loved Eric, and once people cooled off about being bamboozled of not seeing Ace live, they also loved Vinnie. If you asked fans in the early 80s why they weren't going to see Kiss or buying their records anymore, they would not tell you because 2 out of the 4 guys are wearing different designs of clown makeup.
This new character, the audiences didn't buy it.
There's a new guy. Is he going to wear Ace's makeup? No, he's going to be wearing the Ankh, which Paul came up with. And we knew that the fans would be very upset.
And I hate how dismissive they are, like, oh, what's next? The chicken boy makeup? Yeah, sure, like within all of art and design, there's only 5 or 6 cool makeup designs. Get bent. It's pretty obvious that this was only something they started to say in hindsight to justify, you know. So they went on MTV and took off the makeup for all to see. And so the people would know that Toady Fields was right.
Would it be funny if under this he was just a nice Jewish boy?
MTV made a big deal out of this despite not giving a single shit about the band at all prior, and turned out to be just the right thing that Kiss needed to make them relevant once again.
It felt right. I mean, we thought about it for a while, but I mean, we could give you all kinds of great answers, you know, that we went and saw Swami. We did that too. But no, it just felt like the right time to do it. And I mean, the band feels so strong, and it just felt like, do it. The album's great. There's a tour coming up, and
There's really no other reason. This is our 18th record, you know, 10 years on. We feel great, and it's just time. It feels very, very comfortable. I hope it seems that way. I feel fine about it. No, I'm fine.
Now, Lick It Up is a great album too. Gene and Paul like to poo-poo this record, saying that people were listening to it with their eyes, not their ears. Creatures was the far superior record, and I agree, it's better, but not by as much as they claim. This album is a classic metal record too in its own right. The only thing I dislike about it is the fact that it doesn't sound quite as good as the previous record. Michael James Jackson returned, but it had a totally different engineering team, so it doesn't have the reverb or that amazing drum sound. But the drums still sound really good here. A lot of the tone on Creatures was Eric Carr, and he's still here playing as good as ever. Vinnie is more ever-present, playing on the entire record with the exception of the Exciter solo played by Rick Derringer, and he has a writing credit on every track barring 2. And by the by, they're 2 of the weaker cuts. Vinnie really brought out the best of 80s Kiss, despite him being, you know, insane. He co-wrote the title track, which is a huge hit and firmly planted the band back into the spotlight. You may say taking the makeup alone was enough for the band to be back in the mainstream, but without the song, I'm not sure taking off the makeup alone would have worked. It's super catchy and it kind of played into the makeup coming off, with some cool and quite reserved playing from Vinnie, which I'm sure probably killed him on the inside to play that slow, but whatever. At the end of the day, you can't deny the power of a catchy single. And while I do like the title track, it's actually one of my least favorites. It doesn't really represent the album too well, and it doesn't really have much going for it compared to other tracks. A lot of people listen to it and assume the rest of the album sounds like that, but it really doesn't. Despite the more held back production, this album showcases some of the band's heaviest cuts, like Exciter and Give Me More. There are two blazes from Paul that showcase his ever-improving vocal chops. Not for the Innocent is another slow and creepy Gene song in a similar vein to War Machine, with tritonal riffs and a gloomy vibe that evokes Sabbath a little bit. And it also shows Gene really going into his higher register, and I love how it sounds. And I wish he would use that voice more often, though I assume it takes a toll physically. It sounds like it does. But the best Gene song is Young and Wasted. It's a breakneck barn burner that's a little funny because Gene doesn't get wasted. And they weren't very young anymore either. But the riffs in Gene's batshit insane vocal performance take you on a ride that feels like a roller coaster that's about to come off its rails. One of the most underrated Kiss songs. The second single, All Hell's Breaking Loose, is one of few Kiss songs co-written by all four members of the band at one time. It has Paul doing this weird quasi-rapping in the verses, and it's slightly cringeworthy, but it works at the same time. Paul's giving it all his luster, if nothing else. Though I always laugh at this line.
Well, I just looked into my kind of laughed. I said, hey man, I am cool. I am the breeze.
After Blondie's Rapture, I think this is one of the first rock songs to feature rapping. Definitely one of the first to include a riff this heavy, if nothing else. Written by Eric Carr, funnily enough. Apparently he was pissed off at the time because he wanted it to be more Zeppelin and less Grandmaster Flash. But the rapping makes it unique, so I like it. Though I'd be lying if I didn't say that the album kind of blows its load in the first side. Dance All Over Your Face is kind of whatever with some really fucked up lyrics. It's Like a Glove is enjoyable enough, and it's fun live, which I guess is why they played the song live all throughout the 80s for some reason. And On the Eighth Day is also fun, but it's cheesier than a margarita pizza with extra mozzarella. Nigel Tufnell write this shit, but A Million to One is on the second side, and this would have been the perfect second single in my opinion. I love All Hell's Breaking Loose too, but this one would have done way better. It's slightly ballady, but it has this consistent energy to it. You could totally see it in a montage of a Rocky movie. It's about a breakup like I Still Love You. I think it's about the same woman too, actress Donna Dixon, who later married Dan Aykroyd. I guess he stole Paul's love. Paul bears it all out emotionally, and you can hear it in the performance, and goddamn, those vocals are so good, I can't get over it. Lick It Up is a kick-ass record. Don't let the title track fool you into thinking it's a different kind of album than it really is. It's basically Creatures Part 2, and this is not only the best non-makeup Kiss record, but they haven't made an album as good as Lick It Up since Lick It Up, so that means it's all downhill from here, folks. Strap in and strap on. During the Lick It Up tour, Vinnie was not playing ball. He would take his solo for far longer than he should have, leaving Paul, Gene, and Eric sitting at the side of the stage waiting for him to finish with their dicks in their hands. At one point, Paul came out a bit too prematurely for Vinnie to end his solo by screaming, "Vinnie Vincent, lead guitar!" And Vinnie then proceeded to have a screaming match with the frontman in the band's dressing room that got physical, so Eric, Gene, and the road crew had to pry them off each other. God, I wish I could have seen that. They even fired him after the European leg, only to rehire him for the American leg because they couldn't find a replacement. It's like a sitcom plot, I love it. But he was eventually fired because not only was he fucking mental, but because he never signed his contract. Meaning technically he was never even in the band, and he wanted a bigger slice of the pie than what Gene and Paul were offering. He was replaced by a guy called Mark St. John. Gene and Paul put out that they were looking for a shredder who could use all the, at the time, modern techniques popular within the 80s, and by God, they got it. But around this time, Gene approached Wendy O. Williams of the band The Plasmatics, who opened for Kiss on the Creatures tour, with an offer to record a new album after the band's contract with Capitol wasn't renewed. And to avoid any issues with their former label, they recorded this album under the name of Wendy O. Williams, and not The Plasmatics. Though most of the musicians on this record is just the other members of The Plasmatics at this time, with the exception of Gene playing bass under the name of Reginald Van Helsing, along with Ace Frehley, Paul Stanley, and Eric Carr all playing on a song each, Eric and Vinnie co-writing a track, Paul co-writing another, and with Gene co-writing most tracks and producing it, many call this the Lost Kiss album, and it makes sense. Besides Peter Criss, every member of Kiss up until this point is involved in some capacity. The songs like It's My Life and Thief in the Night that would eventually be recorded by Kiss on later releases. Overall, it's a really fun record. Not perfect, you have to have somewhat of a taste for Wendy O. Williams' voice, and as much as I enjoy it, it is definitely not for everybody. Compared to The Plasmatics, it's more in a hard rock direction compared to the metal, punk, and almost hardcore sound of The Plasmatics, though there's still some of that to be found due to Wendy's energy. The best way I can describe it is edgy Joan Jett. Well, edgier Joan Jett. It's kind of a shame that no one really talks about this album anymore because it's pretty good if you're into this sort of thing. I quite like the ballad, Opus in C minor 7, the original versions of It's My Life and Thief in the Night, Priestess, and the sleazy sex anthem, Bump and Grind.
Do you wanna bump? Do you wanna grind? Do you wanna bump and grind with?
Gene Simmons was not on this planet, not on this Kiss planet. I was physically there. I mean, I certainly did all the tours, but mentally I wasn't there. I mean, for years I looked like a drag queen. I looked like Phyllis Diller's cousin or something, wearing Joan Crawford kind of Mommy Dearest clothing with bouffant hairdos that went way up here. And I mean, it would have looked like something I'd fucked the night before.
If you were worried I was being a bit too kind to 80s Kiss, then don't worry, because I am not a huge fan of Animalize. It's not an outright bad record, but definitely the weakest mainline record so far. First off, Michael James Jackson went Splitsville, and Paul decided to produce this record on his own, and when you lose an outside voice to keep you in check, you get sloppy results. This record is basically Lick It Up, but worse. Gene was starring in a movie and stopped caring about Kiss. By his own admission, he got bored of being in a band. He shot out a handful of demos in the studio super fast, and it sounds like it. His songs on this record are filler in the 4th degree. And Vinnie's replacement, Mark St. John, was just not that great in my opinion. Don't get me wrong, he's a good player, but his tone was shit, his solos are unmemorable and go nowhere, and he just in general couldn't hang. He couldn't play the same solo twice, for God's sake. Paul had to sing him solos to play, and he also had to dub in places to fit them better with the songs. And even Eric would come in with the structures of solos. You know it's bad news when the drummer has to help with the guitar solos. Not to say there isn't good tracks. There's some good stuff here. The second single, Thrills in the Night, has guitar work from Mark St. John that makes one assassinate Yngwie Malmsteen, but besides that, it's an anthemic rocker that never fails to get you pumping your fist. Unfortunately, this is the start of Paul kind of over singing, but it isn't too bad yet. But I'll be bitching later, don't worry. I love the scorching opener, Out of the Cold Into the Fire, and Under the Gun is a fun quasi-speed metal song. Get All You Can Take is a decent Zeppelin ripoff, and it's the first time Kiss ever used the word fuck on a record. Alright, but Gene's songs are so lacking, first draft at best. The only reason they're not considerably worse is because Paul worked overtime to get them at least halfway passable, but there's no saving stuff like Burn Bitch Burn with the laziest hook of their career, and lyrics like I Want to Put My Log in Your Fireplace. Lonely's the Hunter and Murder in High Heels are notable for having guitar work from future Kiss guitarist Bruce Kulick, since Mark was having issues, let's say. If I had to point out one good Gene song, would be While the City Sleeps. It kind of reminds me of Naked City from Unmasked. Heaven's on Fire was the lead single and was the biggest hit they had post-makeup, and honestly, for good reason. It's got a nice swing to it and a lot of great vocal hooks from Paul, and it ain't exactly reinventing the wheel, but if nothing else, it's a nice set of rims. Animalize is very much We Have Lick It Up at Home, the album. The absence of Michael James Jackson and Vinnie Vincent is felt, and the new guitarist was just not a good fit. I can only recommend this full record if you've already heard the 2 prior records and just want some more Kiss in this general direction, but keep in mind, it's more 80s glam rock than heavy metal. Mark St. John was along for this band as he developed a form of arthritis in his hand, later diagnosed as Reiter syndrome. It made his hands blow up, and it made it impossible for him to play guitar, so Bruce Kulick filled in on tour since Mark was only well enough to play, I'm not lying, 2.5 shows. Bruce, like I mentioned, played on a couple songs at this record, and he's the little brother of Bob Kulick, whom was almost the original Kiss lead guitarist. And after the Animalize tour, Mark was kicked to the curb because of his illness. Sounds bad that I say it out loud, but he also just was not a good fit for the band, I guess.
Gene offered Mark a chance to play bass on Exciter. That's what it was. And, you know, because just to make him feel good and because he was fast enough to do the part. He played like a passing note going into a verse, coming out of a chorus. The note itself may be the correct note that fits, you know, passing through the chord. I said, but to my ear, it sounds like a mistake. People may think it's a mistake. And quote unquote, he goes, how the fuck would you know? You play the drums, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Okay? And this is after being in the band for like 3 weeks, you know.
If Mark was easier to deal with and played more consistently, then I doubt that Gene and Paul would have kicked him out as fast as they did. And Mark agreed. Bruce took over his spot and stayed with the band for over 10 years. Mark later went on to do a whole lot of nothing. He formed a shirtless band with Peter Criss. He played with David Hasselhoff, and according to rumors, oh no! But Kiss finally have a stable lineup for the first time since the 70s, so let's see how the next album compares.
Yes, the Paul Stanley workout tape for dirty minds and clean bodies. I will show you how to get the body you always wanted and the woman it belongs to. Yes, the Paul Stanley exercise tape. Join me, won't you?
The Paul Stanley workout tape, available where better videos are sold.
Because a muscle is a terrible thing to waste. I'm so excited!
Now you've got your new album out, Asylum. Tell me something about that.
Well, okay, you may have heard this before, but it's round and it's black and it's got a hole in the
Oh,
middle.
no, I can tell what kind of day this is going to be.
Yes. Yes, it's going to be that kind of day.
Asylum is a step up from Animalize, but it doesn't quite reach the heights of Lick It Up. It's still Kiss following the glam trend, which is bizarre when you consider that Kiss helped start the glam trend of the 80s. The transformation from leaders to followers is honestly a little sad. And speaking of sad, look at these costumes. They look like they're thrown up on by the killer clowns from outer space. Gene looks like Divine, Jesus Christ. I'm not dressing like that guy, sorry. I feel like this record has a richer sound quality to it than Animalize. It was produced by both Paul and Gene this time around, but Gene was still off in Hollywood and made movies like the John Stamos classic, Never Too Young to Die, where he plays a gender bender of a villain.
Lads, can't you see the greatness in me? I'm female and male, man and woman. I'm better than you are!
Gene, how do you let this happen twice within the span of a year? The singles were all fun. Who Wants to Be Lonely and All Night are great, classic, hooky pieces of 80s dixie's, though there's not much that make them Kiss songs. Any band of the day could have recorded them, if I'm being honest. With the exception of the big hit, Tears Are Falling. It's not too far off other singles in terms of tone and songwriting, but it's a bit more subdued, which lets Paul's vocals shine, letting his personality through. It has a great vibe to it. One of the best Kiss songs of the Makeupless era, and one of the best Kiss songs period, honestly. And Bruce immediately showed his power level with that solo of his. It's not very shreddy, he lets the notes breathe, it has this crying, wailing character to it. Bruce, through a lot of his tenure, kind of wrote the coattails of people like Eddie Van Halen because that's what he was told to do. But Tears Are Falling doesn't sound like Eddie Van Halen or anybody like that. It sounds like Bruce Kulick. Most of the album tracks are pretty solid, nothing amazing and none that can even touch Tears Are Falling, but they're enjoyable. King of the Mountain is a fun opener. Any way you slice it is usual Gene flair, but it's fun, and after shit like Burn Bitch Burn, I'll take what I can get. Secretly Cruel has a Mr. Speed-esque opening riff with a cool groove. Love's a Deadly Weapon is fun, and Trial by Fire is really catchy, probably my favorite of Gene's on this record. But other than the singles, I'm Alive from Paul is my favorite. A fast, heavy cut with a great chorus that I love. It was co-written by Bruce, and I saw him say in an interview once that Paul isn't really a fan of fast, super up-tempo songs, which is a shame because I would much rather take songs like this than all the Zeppelin ripoffs, honestly. Great riffs from Bruce, and Eric is on fire. Asylum is a good album that just kind of falters. A lot of the songs are good, but not many of them reach the heights like some of the previous records. And it was on this record where Kiss just became another 80s rock band. They lost a lot of what made them unique, not only image-wise, but music-wise. This is still a decent album and a definite improvement. Bruce was a much better fit for Kiss than Mark ever was, but Asylum didn't do as well as Animalize. It only went gold while the prior record went platinum. But the band didn't want to go back to where they were with the Elder, so they needed a real shakeup with a real producer at the mixing desk.
By reason of the fact that we're all playing music, you're influenced by what's going on around you. Naturally, everything is always influenced by what came before it, what's going on currently. Who knows if we have good taste or bad taste, but there's other bands that seem to have the same taste.
For Crazy Nights, they got Ron Nevison, the producer behind Heart's synth-heavy comeback records, and Ozzy's keyboard-laden The Ultimate Sin, and together with Kiss, they recorded the worst album of either of their careers. This is a heinous piece of 80s dick cheese, but not the fun kind of 80s dick cheese. I should probably stop using dick cheese as an adjective. It's not fun like All Hell's Breaking Loose, Heaven's on Fire, or even Who Wants to Be Lonely. The album tracks are tepid at best, it sounds incredibly held back and restrained. The trademark loud guitars that have been a staple of Kiss since day one have been replaced with a Casio that Paul probably fished out of Depeche Mode's dumpster. It makes this record sound like Bon Jovi. And I hate Bon Jovi. Paul said to Bruce that the introduction to keys didn't mean less guitars, but he must have been coping because the guitars can barely even be heard at times. This whole record reeks of desperation, and not in a cool way like Alive. It sounds like a bunch of middle-aged rich assholes who want to keep up to date with their mortgage payments. I know Kiss have been selling out since NAMM, but it sounds way more evident here than ever before. On previous albums, there seems to be excitement to experiment with new ideas, even if the primary motivation was money. One of the singles off this album was Reason to Live, a power ballad. Paul admitted he only wrote it for a crumb of radio play. Was it worth it, Paul? Nah, I kind of kid. Maybe it's childhood nostalgia talking, but I think it's alright. I don't mind the arrangement, and Paul kind of pulls back from the over-singing a little bit, and he sounds good. Bruce delivers solid licks here. I guess I like it. Can you believe I've had sex with a woman before? I know, it surprises me too. But besides that, I think Gene has the far better songs. And Gene's songs suck too. Funny enough, Gene shitting out glorified demos is far more preferable than Paul trying to be Jewish John Bon Jovi. Thief in the Night and No 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 have decent hooks and riffs, and the synths aren't as ever present. And I should clarify, I don't hate synths. I made a Depeche Mode retrospective for God's sake. They're a tool to be used well or to be used poorly. And Kiss, I think they accidentally hit themselves in the head with a hammer. Hell, I even like those cheesy synth-heavy Heart songs. And I love The Ultimate Sin, but when garbage like My Way is blasting through my speakers with Paul's most ear-grating vocal performance yet, and that's with shit like this existing. Paul said he was doing it to see if he could sing high, and Paul, just because you can, it doesn't mean you should. So that's Crazy Nights. It fucking sucks. An awful attempt at radio rock that makes Journey sound like Morbid fucking Angel. And it may have gone platinum, the title track may have been a hit, but was it worth it? I don't know, if you like AOR, then maybe give this one a shot, but I'll stay away if I were you. After Crazy Nights, they released a greatest hits compilation, smashes, thrashes, and hits. A lot of the tracks were remixed, and I hate pretty much them all, with the exception of Love Gun, because they took out the vocals during Ace's guitar solo, which I think is actually kinda cool. But I Love It Loud has been totally neutered. The drums have been fucking ruined. What did Eric do to deserve this? And speaking of Eric getting shit on, Paul and Gene made him sing Beth.
I think I hear the calling. Oh, Beth, what can I do?
Man, fuck you guys. His vocal performance is fine in and of itself. Eric has a good singing voice, and I like the way he sang songs like Black Diamond and Young and Wasted, but making him sing Beth just represents how controlled he was within Kiss. Paul has said that Eric had hang-ups about not being the original member of the band, which I agree, it's silly, it doesn't matter. But could you guys at least been empathetic? Must you have made him sing this song that the original drummer made famous and is synonymous with? Can you imagine how that would have made him feel? He even called Peter to apologize, and Peter just told him to do it, suck it up, and to hang in there. Eric also wanted to play on Paul's solo tour in the late 80s, and Paul said no because otherwise it would have been half of Kiss, which I guess is fair, but who cares? Just let him play, it's only a solo tour. Paul and Gene then both refused to let Eric play on the song Breakout from Ace's first solo album out of Kiss, Frehley's Comments, which he originally co-wrote with Ace during the Elder sessions. Nice one, guys. The cover of Beth in and of itself isn't insulting. What is insulting is what the song represents to how Eric Carr was treated, and we're not done yet, unfortunately. On a brighter note, they included 2 new songs on Smashes, Thrashes, and Hits, and they're both so bad they're good. If you told me this was a collaboration between the Spinal Tap cast and Andrew Dice Clay, I would have believed you. Like other Kiss classics like Bang Bang You from Crazy Nights, they're songs about sex. As you can tell by titles such as Let's Put the X in Sex and You Make Me Rock Hard, they're about as subtle as a prostate exam. The lyrics are so stupid and insipid, and instrumentals aren't really much to write home about. A lot of keyboards and minimal guitar. Paul doesn't even play guitar in either video, so we get to see his push for attempt at dancing without one, and god, this man is just lost without a guitar in his hands. His actual songs, they're fucking atrocious, as bad as shit from Crazy Nights, but come on, You Make Me Rock Hard, I can't bring myself to hate it, it's too fun. It honestly feels like Spinal Tap songs to me, and I love Spinal Tap. Hopefully the band can find their way again after such a misfire that Crazy Nights was. I really hope they don't overcorrect and release an overly long album with glorified demos that sound like offcuts from the Gene Simmons vault. That would be awful.
I kept saying, when are you going to put the makeup on? So we put it back on, okay, now it's on. Now nobody's going to say, when are you going to put the makeup on? What we wanted to kind of make a point of, basically that this band is the old band, is the new band. Kiss has always been Kiss, and even though it changes and evolves, it's very much what it once was. And when I put the makeup on, nothing changed. It is 1975. It's also 1985. It's also 1990. It's 1995. Time is, it's all the same.
You ever wonder if it's all worth it? Kiss had a pretty good run, all things considered, for a little over 10 years. It's by no means perfect, but there's a lot of good music. Too bad none of it is on Hot in the Shade. As I was not so subtly referring to before, Hot in the Shade is made up of mostly slightly cleaned up demos to bring back some grit into their sound after Crazy Nights, and to save some money. And while I appreciate the attempt, it's a gross overcorrection. Kiss are a band who needs at least a little bit of polish, especially at this stage in their career. But these songs are so barren, boring, and there's 15 of them. Who was asking for a Kiss album to be this long? It's nearly an hour, and I would have a hard time to condense it down to a decent 4-song EP. At least Crazy Nights had more to be stimulated by, but this album is just nothing. Flat zero. They didn't even try here. The singles are at least a little bit more memorable, I guess, but Rise to It is bleh, and it's only notable for its video that features Paul and Gene in makeup for the first time in years, even if their outfits are mismatched. Hide Your Heart is okay, I guess, which again, the only notable thing about the song is outside of the song. Ace recorded a version of it on his album Trouble Walking that came out a little earlier, funnily enough. Ace was offered the song prior somehow, it's really bizarre. And honestly, I prefer Ace's version, but even then, the song is hardly a winner. It's saying something when the best song of this album is the power ballad co-written by Michael fucking Bolton. Again, I hesitate to call it great, but it's got a pretty hook, and Paul's vocal performance is nice, and Bruce has a really cool acoustic guitar solo. Gene and Paul are also producing this thing, but again, I don't think Gene gave much of a shit. He was far too busy producing other bands like Black and Blue, whose guitarist Tommy Thayer would co-write some of the slightly more tolerable songs on here, and unfortunately also comes back into the picture later on. But Gene and Paul's production does this album no favors at all. They even use drum machines on a few songs here. What the hell did Eric Carr ever do to you guys? A lot of songs in here are contenders for the worst ever Kiss songs list. Read My Body is an awful rewrite of Def Leppard's Pour Some Sugar on Me, a song I already don't like at the best of times. Cadillac Dreams is lame as hell, and Bruce even let Gene know. Love's a Slap in the Face, Silver Spoon, throw a fucking dart, but Speaking of Eric Carr, he got to sing on an original song for once. Finally, it's been almost 10 years. Little Caesar shows off his personality pretty well. Eric also played bass on it, and Bruce played all the guitar, so there's no Gene or Paul anywhere here. It's by no means a classic, and it's a song you can tell would have been far better if they didn't just use the demo, but if you want a half-decent song off this record, you don't have many choices. Hot in the Shade is just a little pathetic, I won't lie. This may as well be a Demo's Odds and Ends compilation, but at least those types of releases from other bands occasionally have good songs. There's more songs in here that I can stomach as compared to Crazy Nights, but at least they sound like they fucking tried on that last album, but here, no bueno. And it would unfortunately be Eric Carr's last full outing with the band. In early 1991, after the Hot in Shade tour, which credit where it's due was pretty damn great, Eric was diagnosed with cancer of the heart. By November of the same year, he suffered a brain hemorrhage and passed away a few days later. He was 41 years old. The last couple of years of Eric's life, unfortunately, was kinda tough for him, even before his diagnosis. Eddie Trunk, a close friend of Eric's, said that during the Hot in the Shade tour, him and Paul were not speaking to each other at all. They cut his drum solo from the first leg before it was thankfully re-added, and he was asking Eddie to keep his eyes open for a new gig in a different band.
He would call me and ask me about bands looking for drummers.
Mm-hmm.
I'll never forget one time he called me and said, I heard Whitesnake is looking for a drummer. Can you kick the tires for me and find out? There was a lot of weirdness between him and his family and the Kiss camp. There was stories about what happened to his health coverage. There was a lot of really distasteful, hard to believe allegations thrown around at that time.
They didn't exactly fire him, but they tried to get him to resign.
Right.
You know, they were pressuring him while he was on his deathbed to resign. I don't want to speak for them, but I think they realized they could have done things better and differently. And it was a tough time. Everybody was under pressure. Nobody knew exactly what was going to happen. They were coming from a business perspective. I was coming from, you know, the perspective of somebody that was his girlfriend and that was at every doctor's appointment. I was in the hospital bed with him.
He thought his days in Kiss were numbered. Not long after Eric's diagnosis, Kiss were asked to record a new single for the soundtrack of Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. Eric desperately wants to play drums on the track, but Gene and Paul opted to instead use Eric Singer, whom Paul had played with during a solo tour. This hurt Eric deeply, but it hurt even more when they asked Eric to play drums on the next record, which was going to be produced by Bob Ezrin. Gene and Paul insisted that this was only temporary and that as soon as he got better, there would be space for him. But put yourself in Eric's shoes. You're diagnosed with an incredibly rare and deadly form of cancer. And while you're wasting away and suffering through chemo, your supposed friends are recording a new album without you. I'd feel like I was cut off too. If Def Leppard can stand by their drummer for 4 years after his fucking arm was cut off, then Kiss have no excuse. But I will give credit where it's due. In Paul's insufferable memoir, he owned up to how badly Eric was treated during his last days in Kiss.
Though I thought I had made the best choices at the time, I began to realize I'd been wrong. We had cut Eric off in perhaps the worst way by denying him what mattered to him most, his place in Kiss. That had been lost on me while we continued to do everything we thought was important, everything we thought we could and should do. It was wrong to keep Eric from the thing he loved most, what for him was a lifeline, Kiss. And I should have seen that since the band functioned the same way for me and I wasn't even sick. I should have known.
And I shouldn't make it all about the drama. Eric was one in a million. He was the glue that held Kiss together in the 80s. That shot in the arm that they received is why they recorded some of their best material, and my personal favorite Kiss record. His drum solos were fantastic, very entertaining and very musical, and this is coming from someone who usually doesn't like drum solos. He played synths to make it sound like a whole band. It was really cool. I never met him. Hell, he died 8 years before I was even born. But by all accounts, he was an absolute sweetheart of a guy. Always making time for fans wherever he could, and on at least one occasion flew out on his own dime across the country to a Kiss convention to celebrate the band and the fans. His humor was vital, always cracking jokes and making everyone in the room laugh. He was just a good guy to have around by the accounts of everyone who knew him. He was a real salt-of-the-earth type of guy, and the world, let alone Kiss, is just not as good without him. Peter Criss may be the original, and Eric Singer may be a slightly better drummer technically, and they deserve respect too, but neither of them could bring the thunder quite like Eric did. Rest in peace, bud. You're my favorite Kiss drummer. We miss you.
When Eric joined the band, he brought back the energy we had in the beginning. He literally renewed our faith in ourselves.
Eric really loved his fans, and there's nothing he wouldn't do for them. They would send them incredible gifts, like this drum kit a fan made from scratch. Even though he was a great musician, What I missed most about him was his sense of humor. He made me laugh harder than anyone else.
When Eric died, the band lost the force that kicked him in the ass for 11 years. As a drummer, he was definitely one of a kind.
He came from a background of singing in top 40 bands, so he had this uncanny ability to sound like the people he was imitating. He didn't always sound like them, but he always thought he did. We called them Manny voices. Half the time we didn't know the words to the song. The other half the time, maybe we didn't know the music. But we sang, we had a great time, and one thing, while Eric was in the band, the four of us laughed so much, sometimes it hurt. We're always going to miss him.
But the story isn't over yet. In 1992, Kiss released an album dedicated to the memory of Eric Carr, Bring On Revenge.
I think everybody in the band had a sense, without really sitting down and planning it, that this was going to be one for us and not one for the record company or radio or to try to figure out what was cool, what was hip or not. Christians get it. They were saying Born Again. This feels like Born Again Kiss.
We were kind of like off base. All of a sudden we looked at each other and, kind of went, hey, let's get back. Let's get back in the band.
Now, if I haven't already pissed off the Kiss tards before, then I will here. Revenge is not that good of a record, guys. I swear, the only reason they get so much love is the two records that came previous, making it look so good in comparison. Bob Ezrin is back and the sound is fantastic. Eric Carr's replacement, Eric Singer, is a great drummer, and stylistically, they brought it back to basics. There was less hair or glam posturing, and they were simply being Kiss. But songwriting-wise, this album's a dwarf among midgets. It's not the best non-makeup Kiss record. Lick It Up is far better, and it's not even close. Shit, I don't even think this is the best record with Bruce Kulick. I think Asylum is much more solid, despite the radioactive jizz they were covered with. I can see there's a lot to like here, and they're incredibly solid as a band, and this album is one of few examples of Kiss doing something for themselves, other than the money. They weren't trying to appeal to any specific trend, they were just being Kiss. And the lead single, Unholy, is a Kiss classic, maybe the last Kiss classic. It's Gene singing for the first time on a single since I Love It Loud on Creatures, and was finally done trying to be a movie star or the next Rick Rubin. And it's not just a Gene song, but a demon song, starker than anything they did in makeup. With the use of tritones, atmosphere, and even some dissonance, it's a foreboding song that's terrifying. I thought it was incredibly scary as a child, and it still fits Gene even without makeup. With that punishing riff and its aggression and the pinch harmonics, I always get a bit of a Pantera vibe from it. It's a great example of what Bob Ezrin can get out of this band. And Look at You co-wrote this song. Maybe that's why it's the best song off the record. It's too bad that after the lead single and opening track, the album pretty much immediately falters and never quite gets back up on the horse. Tick It Off is an incredibly try-hard stripper anthem that I can imagine being played in the background of a strip scene in one of Rob Zombie's shitty movies. Spit is a hot mess with its awful scat singing and god-awful structure. It has an awful inclusion of the Star-Spangled Banner, which seems silly because it's a song about loving big girls with a lot of cushion for the pushing, but when they got strippers for the tour to dance during Take It Off, would you look at that, there's only conventionally attractive skinny girls. Cowards. Domino is a piss poor attempt at aping ZZ Top, and Billy Gibbons would probably assassinate Gene if he ever heard this. And I'd probably assassinate him for being a fucking creep. And Every Time I Look at You is such a sappy, saccharine ballad that just puts me to sleep. It's fucking anemic, and as someone with an iron deficiency, that's saying something. How do you not only write a power ballad with no power, but in 1992 no less? By this point, rock radio and the record-buying public had no use for schlock like this. On a somewhat positive note, God Gave Rock and Roll to You is an okay enough song. It's a cover by the band Argent with some rewritten lyrics by Paul, Gene, and Bob Ezrin. They recorded it before the album almost to test drive Bob Ezrin as producer after The Elder, and at this point, Eric Carr was still alive, and despite being too ill to actually play drums, he did sing in the a cappella section.
We gave rock and roll to you, gave rock and roll to every.
And he was in the video, and despite the fact he was miming to Eric Singer's parts, and he was so weak and frail at this point, and he lost all his hair, he had to wear a wig, he still played his absolute heart out. And for that alone, I have to give the song at least a little bit of props. It's incredibly cheesy, but not in an insulting way, and it's a decent enough bon voyage for one of the best guys to ever pick up a pair of sticks. besides that, I dig Heart of Chrome a lot. It's the best Paul song off this record, and looky here. Yeah, Vinnie randomly linked up with the band during this era after the Vinnie Vincent invasion got invaded, but they soon enough remembered, oh yeah, Vinnie Vincent is fucking crazy. So they kicked him to the curb, but he still wrote the best songs on this thing. Sorry. Tough Love and Thou Shalt Not are okay. Paralyzed has an amazing intro, but falls apart not so long after, and I Just Wanna is maybe the dumbest song of all time, but I still kinda like it. And it ends with Car Jam 1981, an unreleased jam session from the Elder Sessions that features Eric going apeshit. It originally featured Ace, but Bruce Kulick overdubbed him because, God forbid, Paul and Gene give anybody else money when they can keep it all in one room. It's incredibly lame, but at the same time, Eric Carr and Bruce were incredibly tight and good friends, so for that reason alone, I can't be too mad. Then again, it's not really a song. Ace eventually took this jam and used it for the song Breakout, and it fucking rules. I'd much rather listen to that version any day, even if Eric didn't play on it. Yeah, Revenge is just pretty underwhelming in my opinion. It all goes downhill after Unholy, and despite some cool cuts here or there, it just never properly gets back on its feet. I'm honestly a little mystified as to why this album has such adulation within Kiss circles. Kiss tards are pretty easy to please, I guess. I mean, hell, you're watching, aren't you? And I say this as a Kiss tard. We can smell around. But it didn't sell very well. It barely squeaked out a gold certification, and the tour didn't do so hot either. So it may be time to panic. But hey, it's been long enough. The band are moving to a bold new direction, so why not another installment into the Alive series of records?
The set list finally reached that maturity or something with the band that really kind of caught up to what we were about. And it was definitely the time to record it. I couldn't imagine doing this anytime during the 80s.
Alive 3 is incredibly mediocre. In every way Alive 1 and 2 succeed, this one falls flat. My biggest bitch is that track listing, honestly. You may be thinking, how can they not play songs like Deuce or Turok City Alive? Well, on Alive 2 they set a precedent of not repeating songs. There's no songs in Alive 1 that appear in Alive 2, because 1, it would be redundant, and 2, why not give newer songs time to shine? And that was the mindset after only 3 new studio records since Alive 1. Since Alive 2, we've had 10 new studio records. Granted, they're not all quite as classic, arguably, but they had their fair share of hits during that time, did they not? Many of which, like Tears Are Falling and Crazy Nights, are bizarrely absent. But they made sure to include not only songs like Watching You, which were already on previous Alives, but the fucking Star-Spangled Banner again! Also, this does not feel very cohesive. The first 2 Alives flowed very well together, despite how much fuckery Eddie Kramer did in the mix stitching shit together. But unless you're listening for it, you never notice. For the most part. But you definitely feel it here. The crowd noises sound super unnatural, they fade in and out way too suddenly, the stage raps don't blend in with the songs themselves. Just listen to Paul's stage rap prior to Heaven's on Fire and how it goes into the actual song.
Song's got a beginning where you go, oh yeah, I know that one.
You can clearly tell they weren't recorded at the same time. They don't sound alike. It just doesn't feel like I'm listening to a Kiss show. It feels like I'm listening to a collection of Kiss songs played live. Bruce claims that of all the Alive records up to this point, Alive 3 had the least fixes in post, but it does not sound like it. It sounds even more fake. I don't really get it because Eddie Kramer is back producing and mixing, but there's also someone called Garth?
I like to play.
And he's credited for mixing, and all these mixing engineers and Paul and Gene are co-producers, so if I had to blame anyone, I guess I know who. Also, this may come across as a bit mean, so let me preface this by saying, I have nothing against Eric Singer. I mean, sometimes he seems like a bit of a prick.
If you went to a Raiders game, you wouldn't wear the other teams you wear.
But he's undeniably a really great drummer. I'd be a fool to say he wasn't. He's played on a lot of records I love outside of Kiss, but he's a goddamn human drum machine on this record. He attacks the songs so clinically with no real groove or feel. I'm sure it's fine enough if you saw this tour live, but on a live record where you're focusing on the performance, it's so off-putting. The older songs have totally been neutered, he royally fucked up Detroit City's iconic shuffle, instead giving it this boring heavy metal double bass. He doesn't even attempt the also iconic Rock Roll All Night's drum intro. And the drum roll at the end of Deuce sounds like fucking ultra-quantized MIDI. I've seen people say he later criticized his performance on Alive 3 himself, saying he should have played the songs more faithfully. Now, I can't find a source for this, but I definitely believe it.
We're gonna do something special. We got some members of the family here tonight. And we're not talking about mom and dad. We're talking about Peter, Criss, and Ace Frehley. It's true. I'm not sure if you know. I'm coming home to you. I'm coming home to you.
Around this time, the band noticed these Kiss conventions and decided to cash in themselves with their own conventions that they could monetize. Cool. I gave it shit, but apparently it's a really cool time if you went. Peter Criss even showed up in one of them and sang a few songs during an Unplugged set. And they were later offered to appear on MTV's Unplugged, but only if they appeared with Ace and Peter. And remember, Revenge fell well below expectations, so they kinda had to. But just to show I'm not such a hater, I love the Unplugged record so much. The band were on fire long before Ace and Peter came on for a few songs at the end. The setlist was eclectic and fantastic for a pick of both classics and deep cuts like Coming Home, See You Tonight from Gene's solo album, and even Roll Without Heroes from The Elder. Sure, Domino sucks, and Paul is trying way too hard with the Christina Aguilera shit, but I still love this way more than Alive 3, that's for sure. The band was super tight with the harmonies and acoustic arrangements, and Bruce really killed it, shredding like he did on acoustic, which is not easy. But it obviously opened the floodgates for the reunion, and it would be a cloud that hung over the band as they recorded their next record, which lay unreleased for 2 years. It didn't come out until it got leaked and bootlegged to death, so there was at least a very little fanfare during the thick of their reunion tour, so bring on Carnival of Souls, the final sessions, the Kiss grunge album. The crunge album, if you will.
Gene was very attracted to the dark, kind of edgy stuff. He didn't like the flannel shirts and you look like you work at the gas station. But he heard Radiohead's Creep. I'm a creep. That kills me. And then he would hear the angst and the strength of a Nirvana song that just knew how to connect with people. And the next thing you know, I'm tuning down a little. I'm listening to Alice in Chains and I'm going, wow, there's some cool riffs here. Let me see what I can come up with. So the band was kind of confused. Well, let's make a darker and meaner Kiss album.
Now, Carnival of Souls is kind of the lost Kiss record. There were no videos, none of the songs have ever been played live by the band at any point, and it is maybe the laziest album cover of all time. I never heard no of this album until well into my teenage years, despite being a Kiss nerd the second I dropped out the birth canal. I remember one time seeing the CD at a store and looked at the back, saw no songs I recognized, and put it back because I was way too expensive. It's maybe the most diametrically opposed Kiss album to the band's general ethos. The band was always about having fun, living your life to the fullest, but this album was very influenced by the alt-rock and grunge scenes coming out of the early 90s. This record is very dark. If it wasn't for Gene and Paul's voices, I would have never guessed this was the Kiss record. Say what you want about The Elder, it was different from the band's usual sound, but it was never this outright depressing. And a lot of people hate this album, especially Paul Stanley. He said in 2001, "I never believed the world needed a second-rate Soundgarden, Metallica, or Alice in Chains." Now, Paul, that may be true, but the world also didn't need a fourth-rate David Lee Roth in the 80s.
Well, I should actually say there's a lot of girls who feel like they want to take Eric home and mother him. Well, I tell you something, he may look like a little boy, but he's built like a man.
But believe it or not, I don't hate this album. I've always had a taste for bands like Alice in Chains, Nirvana, The Melvins, and L7, and I'm not one of those metal guys who hate grunge. I like both. And despite Paul's resistance to making this album, apparently, producer Toby Wright said he was more than on board during the recording sessions. A lot of the best cuts off this thing are his. Master and Slave has a killer riff and groove, Gene for the first time in years lets a rip on bass in the verses, and the chorus has this foreboding crawl that's so menacing, and I love it. I also really dig Hate. It's a great faster cut that opens the record strong, and Eric Singer really kills it here. Jungle is a vibe and a half, It Never Goes Away is pretty much doom metal, and Rain is pure Alice in Chains worship with its dour harmonies and slow dirge of a riff. And that makes sense because the producer of this record, Toby Wright, had recently done the Tripod and Unplugged record for that band. During this time, Gene was really into the new alternative bands of the day. Apparently he was trying to sell Paul and doing a record like this, saying he wants to be like Billy Corgan. And now I like the Smashing Pumpkins, don't get me wrong, but Gene wants to be Billy Corgan is objectively hilarious. Everything about that is just really funny. He joined bands like the Melvins and Red Cross on stage, and there's a somewhat cursed picture of Gene from around this time with Steve McDonald of Red Cross, Kim Gordon from Sonic Youth, Mike Watt from the Minutemen, and Kira Rossler from Black Flag. God, I would love to be a fly on the wall during whenever this picture was taken. It must have been such a weird mix of energy. And when Kiss curated their own tribute record, which was kind of weird, honestly.
Which was basically a tribute to themselves because they were curating it. It's like inviting people to your own surprise birthday party.
Most of the bands picked were heavier or alternative bands. like Garth Brooks. I imagine he felt more comfortable with the trends of the 90s than the trends of the 80s, where Paul felt like a fish out of the water in the 90s, but he fit right in the 80s. Gene has this weird song called Seduction of the Innocent with some vaguely Egyptian-styled riffs. The song takes its name from a book written by a psychiatrist named Frederick Wertham that basically said that every possible problem you could think of was caused by comic books somehow. But this song is about a priest who's probably not a good Christian. And this was around the time those sex scandals about priests came out. The lyrics seem to be about the duality of these kinds of people, who preach peace, love, and understanding, but behind closed doors be actual monsters. And the hook is weird and trippy, even for this album standards.
Everybody thinks there's always a reason. Need a reason to cry. You kiss the hand of a man for all seasons and don't know why.
And as much as I like a lot of these tracks, this album isn't as solid as it could be. There's a lot of filler and a lot of the songs just sound unfinished. It's a very top-heavy album for the most parts, and I originally thought this was because Paul and Gene were busy planning the reunion, but according to Toby Wright, that stuff didn't come up until the mixing process, so I have no idea. But thankfully, the other guys pulled their weight. Eric Singer was more than solid, and Bruce co-wrote 9 songs, plays bass on 5 songs, plays all the guitars on 6 tracks, and he even sang the lead vocals on the ending track, I Walk Alone. A fitting track given that this would be his last album with the band, and it's not amazing, honestly. Bruce is not a great singer, and he doesn't make up for it with attitude and style like Ace can, but it fits. His voice is pretty monotone, but the guitar work and arrangements and weird backward effects and stuff I think help it a lot. It's a decent enough song for Bruce to bookend his time with the band. A very valuable piece of Kiss history.
I walk alone, let me be. Everything I've dreamed of being is me. And I've got myself to lean on. I got both my feet on the ground.
Overall, Carnival of Souls is pretty good, honestly. By no means great, there's a lot of duds, but I think the highlights make this record at least worth checking out. Sure, you can argue that this isn't a Kiss album with its doom and gloom, but at least it's a hard rocking album, which is more than you can say for stuff like Crazy Nights. The album is just kind of a victim of how it was released. I mean, hell, it was leaked. I've heard some rumors that Eric Singer leaked it himself because he was bitter about the reunion. Either that or his friend did it, I don't know, it's weird. Keep in mind, this is pure speculation. I have no proof of this. And by the time it was released quietly with this boring artwork just so the record buying public didn't think that this was the coveted reunion record that they were waiting for. Like a big sign that said, "Don't buy me!" It's a shame because there's mock-ups of what the artwork was supposed to be, and even though it's painfully 90s, it's at least something. This album looks like an odds and ends release, not a proper studio album. And the few Kiss nerds who actually bought it fucking hated it because it sounds so out of left field. But it's not bad, just different. While there's songs in this album that aren't exactly winners, I don't think any are outright bad, and it's been a while since we've had a Kiss record with no bad tracks, so I'll take it. But this was the end of the makeupless era of the band, and given some of their late 80s output, I'm glad that this bookending album is as decent as it is. Of course, in 1996, Peter Criss and Ace Frehley came roaring back into the band. They announced their comeback at the Grammys with Tupac Shakur, which is another bizarre image, and with Hootie and the Blowfish, this is a cursed blunt rotation. They went on a massive reunion tour in the biggest venues on the planet, sending them out within minutes. It was a perfect storm of a love for Kiss, 70s nostalgia, and general extravagance. It was one of the biggest tours of the decade, and it put Kiss back on top after losing a lot of steam in the early 90s. To help pull this off, they brought in a new manager after Bill Aucoin left in the early 80s. Gene and Paul basically managed the band themselves after that. So they brought in Doc McGee, and I fucking hate this toupee wearing, Ozempic taking rectal wart. I can't say that C word anymore, and I can't afford another one of these videos being demonetized, but I want to say it's so goddamn bad for this guy. He's like a black hole of charisma. Listening to him talk makes me uncomfortable. He represents everything I hate about corporate America. He comes across as a slimy freak who'll fuck you over as soon as he gets a chance if he feels like he can get ahead. I hate his voice, I hate his face, I hate his fucking wig. Dude, you're bald. We all know you're bald. Stop trying to fool us. And Ace and Peter may have been back in the band, but not as equals. They're not calling any shots, and they're not getting the same paychecks. They are employees, not partners. And this is a big thing with bands. It sucks, but it's business, but I don't know, I just can't let that go, really. It just seems like piss poor justification. Gene and Paul talk about how, oh, we never left the band. We kept it going. We wouldn't be able to do this tour if we went away. I'm sorry, Paul, but songs like Lick It Up and Heaven's on Fire, while they may be hits, didn't affect the ticket sales of the reunion tour. You wanna know how I know this? You didn't play anything released post Love Gun! It was nostalgia. Besides, doesn't absence make the heart grow fonder? If you just want more money and power, just fucking say that. Be honest. Morally, I think it's fucked up because everyone is doing the same amount of work on stage. So I don't think it's far-fetched to say everyone should get the same money. But whatever. There's a reason I'm not a gazillionaire. Feel free to call me a dirty commie in the comments. And hearing Gene and Paul talk about it is pretty funny because they knew it was going to be hard to try and work with Peter and Ace again, but they did it for the cash. They were not doing that great. Regardless of my opinion, Revenge was a return to form. A lot of people liked it, but it did not sell that well, and the tour suffered. So how well do you think a Kiss grunge album released in the mid-90s would have turned out? Especially after the taste they gave everyone of a reunion tour with that Unplugged record. By the mid-90s, the 20-year cycle worked its magic, and 70s nostalgia was in, and in a big way. No one besides weirdos like me wanted to hear Kiss try their hand at grunge, and I wasn't even born by that point. Carnival of Souls, if released, probably would have done worse than The Elder. They needed Peter and Ace back to make those big bucks and save the band. And they knew it. I'm sure they were both massive pains in the ass. I certainly wouldn't want to be in a band with Peter Criss circa 1996 either, but both those guys put asses in seats. But the reunion seemed to be pretty great for everyone who saw it. Peter and Ace needed a bit of help because they hadn't toured like Paul and Gene did during the time they both left. Tommy Thayer actually helped both of them with remembering what exactly they did back in the day, and I obviously wasn't there, but from what I've seen of the performances and the Donington 1996 soundboard, seems fine. Ace sounds good, but Peter started using these awful drum triggers and he was definitely not the man he once was. Not awful, and I don't know if the triggers were mixed in with real drum sounds or what, or anything like that. I wasn't his tech. Imagine it's similar to playing an electronic kit. But even if you play an electronic kit, you still gotta play decently to sound good. So don't use the fact that he used triggers to totally write off his performances. Tension-wise, at first it was actually okay. They got along well enough, and Peter and Ace behaved. Then they decided to release a new album. That was fun while it lasted.
I was really excited. I was like, wow, we're going to finally do a studio album together as a band. All of a sudden, they're like, you're going to do what we tell you to do. You know, we're going to put our songs on it. We'll pay you for the record, and we'll say you played on it, but we don't want you to tell the world you didn't play on it. I couldn't live with that.
Psycho Circus, I had very limited involvement. You know, I wasn't invited to the studio. You know, when you hear Paul and Gene talk about it, it's like I didn't show up or, you know. The reason I'm not on any of the songs is because I wasn't asked to be on them.
This is the Force Awakens of Kiss albums. Psycho Circus was an album I remember liking a bunch as a kid, and it's one that I continued to defend as I got older, saying things like, sure, it's not a real reunion album, but it's still pretty good. But age brings wisdom, and yeah, this record is mid at best. This was supposed to be a proper Kiss reunion. They're gonna get Bob Ezrin back in the producer's chair with all 4 original members. Yeah, about that. Bob Ezrin was busy, and in his place was Bruce Fairbairn, mainly known for his production for Bon Jovi, Poison, and other classic rock bands' later records that mostly sold quite well despite most of them being pretty shit. I hate this production so much. It's so glossy and polished, and sure, that might be okay if you're producing track like Poison, but keep it away from Kiss. If Bob Ezrin was busy, why not Eddie Kramer? His production with the band has been far more solid anyway, in my opinion at least. Did we really need to get the guy behind Slippery When Wet? And famously, this is not a reunion album. Kevin Valentine plays most of the drums, and he doesn't play anything like Peter. Tommy Thayer plays most of the guitar, as well as Bruce Kulick on a couple of tracks, and Paul and Gene have changed stories as to why this is like this. They said they were trying to renegotiate contracts, they never bothered showing up, and them not being good enough by either their standards or Bruce Fairbairn's, whereas Peter and Ace have both said that they were simply just not invited, or actually paid almost $1 million each to not play on the record. And I believe Peter and Ace, honestly. Changing your story is never sign of truthfulness, and I don't believe that they're unable to play in the studio. You can cheat a lot in the studio, so even if they're as bad as they claimed, it's not as if it can't be fixed. Peter and Ace were fine enough playing these songs live, maybe not amazing, but it was passable. There's only one song where every member plays on it, and that's Ace's own Into the Void. It was rewritten a bit in the studio, and Paul and Gene claimed they both had to help a lot into arrangements, but Carl Cochran, the song's co-writer, calls bullshit. And it's hardly shocked me, but it's such a breath of fresh air. It's just a straight up hard rock song with all 4 original guys who started the span in the 70s. I love Peter's kind of shitty drumming, Ace's solo and dejected performance, and just the overall chemistry. Ace even remixed the song himself to give it a more raw and lively feel. Maybe it's just the Ace shill in me, but it's definitely the best song of the album. This album is full of songs that hardly even feel like Kiss, even discounting the lack of original members. Raise Your Glasses is an awful attempt at a motivational, congratulatory rock song that irritates me. We Are One is an awful ballad that is as sappy saccharine as it is dishonest. For a guy that likes to tell it like it is, Gene wrote some kumbaya type shit here, like, yeah, we are one, while you're feuding and excluding band members from recording sessions. Sure, you might say it's about the Kiss army, but Kiss fans are fractured to all hell. There's Gene and Paul guys, Ace and Peter guys, downright shills, and we all fucking hate each other. It's civil war, and it's been this way since the early 2000s. I don't like Kiss fans. I am not fucking one of you. I hate every last one of you. That includes you too, Kevin! We are not one. We're 6,473 at best. And how could I not mention the worst Kiss song of all time? Worse than Read My Body, worse than My Way, worse than Cadillac Dreams, worse than anything from Peter's solo discography, you name it. I finally found my way to you as a heinous retread of Beth written by Paul, without anything what made Beth endearing. It's so calculated, they were trying so hard to make lightning strike twice. But if anything, this makes Beth seem worse in comparison. The instrumental sounds like stock, easy listening trite. Peter didn't even give a single shit with his performance. When Paul's vocals come in, it makes me want to commit a fucking hate crime. Bob Ezrin? How dare you? I expect this shit from Paul. But not you, Bob. I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed. Besides Into the Void, I guess I like the title track. It's a song that's still played live on later tours, and for good reason. Within is a Carnival of Souls offcut, and it goddamn sounds like it. But it's a cool vibe, and Gene's performance is admirable. Dreamin' is an okay rocker that got them sued by Alice Cooper for being too close to I'm 18, and
face and hands. Close your eyes and take a look at your life. I'm 18 and I don't know what I want. Between the darkness and the light, I'm only dreaming.
yeah, but my second favorite track is Journey of a Thousand Years. It's really bizarre, dense, epic, and not Kiss at all. Honestly, it somewhat reminds me of The Elder, and maybe that's why I dig it. There's a lot of strings, acoustic guitar, and it has a really great vocal from Gene, hitting some of his highest notes ever. I also love the reprise of the title track solo, just such great scale, it sounds huge. This is honestly kind of a great forgotten Kiss song. Yeah, Psycho Circus not only barely a Kiss album, but it doesn't even sound like Kiss. Sure, you could say the same for a lot of Kiss records, but this album was marketed as the return of the classic Kiss lineup, and they gave us this horse shit. It's honestly a little insulting. Paul says that the new material that they could write could never compare to the classic albums in the hearts of fans, and that's true, but bands like Aerosmith were getting the biggest hits of their career at the time. Sure, those songs also don't sound like classic Aerosmith, but people still liked it. That's a lame excuse, Paul, and you know it. This album just isn't that good. Don't piss on me and claim it's raining, Paul. This is hardly Love Gun. And that's not nostalgia talking. Remember, I'm a younger fan. This album is 1 year older than me. I heard it a lot as a kid, and I used to like it way more. There's a song called It's My Life, released on the box set. It was recorded during this album's sessions, and again, it's way better than most actual songs with this album. It's a cheesy but fun slab of rock that screams Kiss in terms of subject matter. It's about living your life and being yourself no matter what. It's really wholesome, and I kinda love it. Ace even shares lead vocals with Gene on this song, with the spaceman singing the last verse after a great solo, which I don't know if it was really him or not, but still, it's a good solo regardless. It's a fun song that maybe could have done well for them if released as a single. But yeah, the most interesting thing about this record is the fact that it got ICP so upset. What the fuck was up with that, by the way? In 1999, a movie called Detroit City was released, obviously with a little bit of a Kiss theme with that title. It's about 4 drop kicks who go on an adventure to see Kiss live at Cobo Hall in Detroit in 1977. And honestly, I fucking love it. It's a great coming-of-age flick, and you don't need to be a Kiss fan to like it, but being one definitely enriches the experience. But even if you hate the band, I think most can still enjoy this for what it is. It's a fun, lighthearted coming-of-age comedy with some slightly random Sam Raimi / Coen Brothers heightened reality thrown in there for good measure. They did not need to go this hard with the camera movements and editing, that's for sure. It's the only movie I can think of that has a guitar riff jump scare. The cast is super stacked with Edward Furlong as Hawk, Giuseppe Andrews as Lex, Sam Huntington as Jam, and James DeBello as Trip. And I hate to say it, but I was definitely an amalgamation of all these idiots in high school. They seem like actual friend groups I've had. While exaggerated, they seem like real friends with a history. Also, people like Natasha Lyonne and Lynn Shay are great in their supporting roles.
And besides, those jeans are so tight. I can see your penis.
It gets so bizarrely outrageous and logic is often left by the wayside. I like when Lex is being chased, he causes a big pileup and just turns up above all of them for no reason, or when Trip accidentally eats a joint and destroys a girl's bathroom.
Get the fuck out of here, man!
Sorry. It's like a live action cartoon, I goddamn love it. It often screams the fact, hey, we're in the 70s, a lot. The intro is total memory berries for the entire decade, but they definitely play into it. Like when the teacher's reading a newspaper that just has a headline about the Jonestown Massacre. Like everything in the movie is amplified and over the top on purpose. Like Kiss are themselves. There's a lot of classic lines.
I wanna talk, Lex. Your mom's a fucking d***.
Just because she's a female gynecologist, that doesn't mean she's a lesbian. And even if she was, at least my mom didn't give birth to me while she was on LSD.
Shrooms! Anyone up for an animal?
As they say in the tampon biz, the next period.
It's a teenage girl walking along the side of the highway. I mean, they make scary movies that start out like that.
Hey, but they make porno movies that start out like that too, man.
I just lost my virginity in a confessional booth! Lord have mercy!
The soundtrack is pretty great all throughout. It's got a pretty good selection of 70s classics, some cool covers like the Donnas doing Strutter and Pantera doing Cat Scratch Fever. Granted, Marilyn Manson's Highway to Hell is pretty awful, but oh well. And there's an awful new Kiss song written by Diane Warren called Nothing Can Keep Me From You, obviously trying to piggyback on I Don't Want to Miss a Thing. If the songs didn't share a writer, I would encourage someone to sue. And as much as I don't like I Don't Want to Miss a Thing, it at least works with the Michael Bay blockbuster, but for a coming-of-age comedy that takes cues from Raising Arizona, are you fucking kidding me? The song is awful for a lot of the same reasons the Aerosmith song is, but the blatant recycling makes it considerably worse. Besides that, it can get pretty formulaic, there's a lot of tropes all throughout, and there are definitely more homophobic slurs than I remembered as a kid.
No. Not the fake.
And the audio gets badly blown out at points.
Brilliance, Trip. Sheer fucking brilliance. Why don't you give Albert Einstein here the fucking Nobel Prize?
How did no one notice that? What the fuck? Also, we get it, Gene. Your wife is very hot. It's definitely an underrated classic. It didn't do that hot, to put it lightly. It got pretty mixed reviews, and Edward Furlong thought it was going to kill his career.
They sent me a copy that I watched at home, and I was alone, and I put it on, and I made it about halfway through, and I'm like, this is it. My fucking career's over. I was like, oh, dude, this is horrible. This is awful.
Don't worry, buddy. Kiss isn't going to kill your career. You did a pretty good job of that yourself. How do you do movies like Pet Sematary 2, inject heroin in your dick on a daily basis, and think a silly comedy is going to kill your career, but has attained a cult classic status in recent years? And I'd recommend it to anyone who's a fan of stuff like this. We need to go back to the 70s aesthetic for movies and shows, man. The 80s stuff has been everywhere since W. Throw us a bone here. After this, in 2000, the band decided to call it quits and go on their first farewell tour, mainly because they're all fucking miserable.
We decided to do a farewell tour with Ace and Peter because we couldn't depend on each other.
It became drudgery and ugly.
Peter was an ass to everyone.
Get out of here, man.
Ace was out of his head, and he got super mad at Gene for cutting his daughter out of Detroit Rock City because apparently she had a cameo or a small part or some shit like that. And Paul and Gene were just trying to get through it. They likened it to putting an animal out of its misery. I've seen the last Kiss Pro Shot show, and it seems fine, though they might have messed with it in post. But in general, the shows are pretty rough. Peter didn't even make it to the end of the tour. Eric Singer filled in for dates in Australia and Japan, in the Catman makeup. We'll come back to this later. But it was honestly much better musically with him, since Peter's skills had declined so much by then, and Eric actually knows how to hold a pair of drumsticks. But of course, the farewell tour wasn't the farewell of the band. That would make too much sense. Paul talks about a guy coming up to him at a mechanic or something, saying, hey man, when's your next tour? And that's what gave him the green light to go ahead and keep going, which is stupid as all hell, if it's even true. The band with Eric and Ace played at the 2002 Winter Olympics, which was Ace's last time with the band.
I swore I wouldn't tour anymore with them, and they said, we'll do the farewell tour, and I swear to you, Ace, that'll be it. Gene swore to me on his mother. Then he calls me up and he says, we're gonna do another tour. I go, you may be doing a tour. You can put Tommy Thayer in makeup. I don't give a
Tommy Thayer was brought in as the space band. Then Peter came back for Live 4, Kiss Symphony. God, this is a mess.
How hard is it to get the band back together for any kind of gig?
Nightmare.
And before I get people commenting, yes, I know about the Millennium concert recorded in
Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada.
It was supposed to be a Live 4, but it was shelved for years and not released until 2006 in the Kiss Alive box set, and it was shelved for good reason. It's not very good. It's not awful either, but it's so redundant. Most of these songs were in prior Alives, and they were done much better there. Shit, I probably like Alive 3 more than this. At least Alive 3 had more reason to exist. I can at least see an argument as to why you'd want to listen to those songs over the originals, even if I vehemently disagree. But these are pretty much the same but worse. I don't like how the drums sound, the mix can be weird, and just lacks a certain quality that a live album should have. All the previous Alives were recorded over multiple nights, so they could pick the best performances of each song. But when you have one night, you're kinda screwed. I don't believe Eddie Kramer was involved, and it shows. It's just so lackluster, not worth your time at all. Anyway, onto the Alive 4 that actually exists.
People don't really know what to expect. We just want to let you know that you're going to get everything that Kiss is known for. There's going to be enough firepower on that stage. Well, it's more than most third world countries have. That's number one. Number two is the symphony orchestra is going to be completely mic'd, and all of them are going to be in Kiss war paint. The entire 60-piece Melbourne Symphony Orchestra.
And only an orchestra like the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra would do it, because, I mean, we've been approached to do this before, but, you know, the idea of working with an orchestra where you're twisting their arms to do this, these people are as crazy as we are, but they're amazing musicians.
What a fucking waste. Fun fact, this show was recorded in Melbourne, Australia, where I live. Don't ask about the accent, we'll be here all day. And my dad and older sister actually went to the show. I didn't because I was only 3 years old and I'm still kind of pissed about it. One of my earliest memories was looking out my front door, knowing I was missing out on seeing Kiss. Yes, I was a Kiss freak even at that age. But listening to it and watching the DVD now, I realized I wasn't missing out on much. Now, I don't mind some classical, but it's almost never good when mixed with rock and metal. I swear, the idiots who say, classical is just heavy metal without electricity. These people have no clue about composition. If anything, classical is jazz without electricity. I'm sorry to sound pretentious, but it's true. And if anything, it's on brand. The band were pretentious about it themselves.
It's something that only we, in our insanity, would even attempt. It's something that's never been done before.
Never done before? Scorpions did it in 2000. Metallica did it in 1999. Yngwie Malmsteen did it in 1997. Deep Purple did it in 1969. Before Kiss was even formed! You guys aren't doing anything new. In fact, it probably worked better for those other bands. A lot of Metallica was heavily inspired by classical, so when you listen to songs like Call Cthulhu and S&M, it kinda works. And mixing classical with rock music is kind of Yngwie's whole shtick. But Kiss? They're a band of many talents, but whoever listened to a song like Do You Love Me and said, you know what the song needs? A fucking tuba. Nothing against the arrangements done by David Campbell, I'm sure he did the best he could, but these songs simply weren't built for such an expansive troupe of musicians. While there were some strengths to be found in Destroyer, Bob Ezra knew not to go too overboard, because when you do, the songs become too busy and muddled. Half the time I have a hard time hearing the guitar. There's quite literally too many cooks in the kitchen. And they even played that heinous piece of shit Great Expectations with a children's choir and all. And seeing kids' presence while Gene is singing these lyrics repulses me. Hey! Simmons, leave the kids alone. There's 3 segments to Alive 4. The first is usual Kiss fare, 4 guys, bass, drums, 2 guitars. The second set is acoustic with the Symphony, and the third is the longest act with the band back on electric instruments and the Symphony and the whole 9 yards. I understand having an unplugged section for ballads and such, but why is there 6 songs and no orchestra? Isn't that the whole gimmick? It's the only thing this release has going for it. Why would you make such a big stink over the Symphony only to not include it for a big chunk of the show? Metallica had it the whole time. What's your guys' excuse? You'd think the Unplugged section would be better, and it is. With less going on, it gives these songs more room to breathe. Beth on here is pretty good, no complaints. The other ones are fine enough, but I'm sorry, this is gonna sound super nerdy, but I need to get this off my chest. I hate the guitar tone. On MTV Unplugged, their acoustics were set up with mics to capture the raw sound of the acoustic instruments, but here, they're instead plugged into acoustic electrics, into an amp, and using the piezo pickups under the bridge of the guitars. And maybe you don't care, or you like the sound of piezo guitar pickups, but I want to hear the wood and the air coming out of an acoustic guitar, not a shitty DI signal. I understand it's more work, but could you guys not have paid someone to set up some microphones in front of 2 guitars and a bass? Was that a bridge too far? If you're going to half-ass it, then don't even bother. This is probably the dorkiest rant I've ever gone on, I apologize. Nah, that's a lie, I don't. The lineup is weird on this album. They brought back Peter Criss, but Tommy Thayer was on guitar. I obviously wish Ace was there, but it wouldn't make that much of a difference, I'll be real. I don't need to hear an orchestral rendition of Shock Me. It's just odd to see Peter and Tommy with the band, but fake Frehley does fine enough, I guess. This funny enough was because the promoters of the Symphony show and or the Aerosmith co-headline show that followed wanted at least 3 out of 4 original members, so Gene and Paul buckled and they tried to get Ace, but he said no because he took the farewell tour seriously. So they got Peter, which is funny considering how much Gene and Paul both hate him.
Peter was not what you'd call an intellectual.
He wasn't qualified to make musical decisions. For all intents and purposes, he might have been tone deaf.
I love how they say, oh, the farewell tour could just be farewell to Peter and Ace, only to get Peter back and keep the gravy train going. but a bunch of hypocrites. Speaking of hypocritical behavior, during the press conference for the Symphony, there was only Peter, Paul, and Gene. Tommy wasn't even there. Of course, the first thing they were asked about was Ace. They make it seem like Ace might actually be there, despite Ace already saying no by this point.
Where's Ace?
Oh my God!
Ace, come on, man, it's all right.
Ace isn't here. We're hoping he'll be with us at this spectacular concert.
Just to milk the fans even more, giving them hope that Ace might actually be there so they buy tickets. That's some scumbag shit. I don't care what you say. And while on tour, Paul praised Peter by saying, Peter Criss is playing better than he's had in years. Whatever he needs to sort out and put in perspective, he's done. And in his book, Sex, Money, Kiss, Gene says, he has trained and worked hard, and the results speak for themselves. He's never sounded better. Drumming and singing, the fans are thrilled, and so is the band. And honestly, yeah, Peter stepped up his game from what I can tell. He was hitting harder and carried the swing of those songs quite frankly much better. Keep in mind, I'm not a drummer, I can barely play guitar, so take my opinion with a grain of salt, though you should probably take Gene and Paul's opinions with grains of salt too, since after the Aerosmith tour, Peter was kicked to the curb to make way for Eric Singer in his makeup. And Tweedledee and Tweedledum gave the same reasons for getting rid of him, mainly him being a diva, which I 100% believe, and his poor playing, which I don't. And honestly, I don't blame him for not wanting to be Gene and Paul's lackey. That guy has been there since the beginning and deserves the respect that it entails. Sure, he wasn't in the band for 15 years, but not playing on records like Hot in the Shade doesn't exactly hurt his credibility. During that Aerosmith tour, Tommy Thayer was being paid more than Peter Criss. What else more can I say? Being subservient may be good enough for Eric Singer, but it ain't good enough for the real Catman, that's for sure. And speaking of the copycat, and by extension Fake Frehley, I should probably discuss that now. As you can tell, I'm totally fucking against Scab Kiss. I think it's a farce. Not because I'm against anyone who wasn't the original lineup. My favorite record is Screeches of the Night. No Ace nor Peter to be found. And it's not because I hate Tommy and Eric. They're good musicians. Tommy seems like a stand-up guy, and Eric runs his mouth a little, but whatever, I'll let it slide. And they've done great work outside of Kiss. Eric has played on some great records with Alice Cooper. The Industrial Brutal Planet is by far my favorite of them. And he was in a band called Badlands with Jakey Lee and Ray Gillen in the late 80s that ruled. He only played on their debut album, but that album is fantastic. The album's a classic, and Eric's thunderous drums are a big reason why. And Tommy Thayer was in a band called Black and Blue in the 80s, and while they were far from amazing, their debut album I think is a solid piece of hard rock and somewhat glammy fist-pumping affair. Hold On to 18, Wicked Bitch, Show Me the Night, and Chains Around Heaven are all worth your time if you're a fan of catchy hard rock. Which, if you're this far into a Kiss documentary, I imagine you are. And Tommy's guitar work is superb. He was clearly influenced by Ace. I mean, his main guitar throughout that band's tenure was a Les Paul, and you can hear it in his playing, but he had his own style. And it was a shame we never really heard much of that in Kiss. So yeah, I like Tommy and Eric. I like them so much I wish they could be their own people within this band.
No matter who you aspire to be, you're never going to be better at being them than they are. So you gotta be the best you.
Shit, Tommy plays Ace's licks note for note. At least Bruce gave those songs his own twist. Even when Tommy plays solos from Bruce's era, he makes them sound as if Ace Frehley's playing them. And Eric's drums were severely kneecapped. Sure, I didn't like how he played older Kiss songs, but it was unique. It was his own twist on the material, and he should be allowed to do that. I love when Gene and Paul try and defend this shit. They're like, oh, what was next after the Fox? The Dog Boy? First off, Eric Carr and Vinnie Vincent's makeup designs were cool as shit, and they fit the guys wearing them. Meanwhile, Tommy and Eric just look weird because those designs were designed with Ace and Peter's face specifically. So it just looks wrong on them. Sure, the Fox and the Ankh were nowhere near as iconic, but those designs weren't even around for that long, keep in mind. You guys compare Kiss characters to superheroes all the time.
How many Batmen have there been? And for somebody to say, well, you're musicians, you're not superheroes. Guess what? We're as much superheroes as those guys are.
And they're sure shit more than 4 superheroes people like. Back in the day, I doubt many people said, oh yeah, my favorite member of Kiss is the Star Child. No, they said Paul Stanley, Gene Simmons, Ace Frehley, and Peter Criss. Okay, I doubt many people said Peter, but still, if you look at old toys of the band, like the ones from the 70s or even the McFarlane stuff from the 90s, they don't say the Demon. They say Gene Simmons. Look at the old commercials.
With makeup diagrams so you can look like Gene, look like Paul, look like Peter, or look like Ace.
Sure, now they say the names of the characters, but only after they started doing this shit. Look at the records. They were never credited as the characters. The Catman wasn't credited for drums. Peter was. Look at the solo albums. I'm not saying they never used the characters' names. I know they did, but only really in stuff like comic books. They weren't anonymous like the Residents. The identities of each guy was the character. If you asked Dimebag Darrell who was tattooed on his chest, he wouldn't tell you the Spaceman. He would say Ace fucking Frehley. I didn't start playing guitar because of the Spaceman. I started playing guitar because of Ace fucking Frehley. And Paul and Gene tried to defend it by saying, oh, we're replaceable too. Oh, bullshit. I doubt even the biggest Kiss shills would pay big money to see a version of Kiss with the longest serving member as Eric Singer. Paul would sooner die then let someone else become the star child. And that turned out to be a true prediction. Hell, during the farewell tour, Gene and Paul said shit like this.
Without Ace and Peter, anybody else wearing the makeup was diluted.
In hindsight, the makeup really belonged to the original lineup in the sense that we created it and it should only be worn by us.
If any Paul and Gene shows are still watching, then I'm sorry, but this is classic.
Having somebody don the outfit of his predecessor really isn't that calculated.
We didn't feel honest or comfortable with the makeup anymore because in hindsight, the makeup really belonged to the original lineup.
They say whatever they need to fit their current agenda. They seem to have no core values they can't exploit in the name of money and milking you shills dry. Now let me say, you're allowed to still like the final lineup. You're allowed to simply not care about it being half a tribute act. That's up to you. There's a difference between being a fan and being a shill. You guys aren't being paid by Gene and Paul. There's no need to defend their honor and pretend they're perfect angels who've done no wrong. I'll call out Ace and Peter. Peter bitched so much about being back in the band for the reunion tour, but not only did he come back, but he was pissed when his contract wasn't renewed. That's hypocritical as fuck. Ace Frehley talks a whole lot of shit and for a while was pathetically trying to get back into Kiss, and his last handful of solo records have also sucked ass. And Peter never had a good solo album to begin with. I'm not a shill. I'm just realistic. Anyway, Scab Kiss went on for another few years. Both Gene and Paul released solo albums that both sucked ass. Along swearing off ever making a new Kiss album.
I think what we were aiming for with Sonic Boom was to make a classic album. Now, some people tend to think that classic and retro are interchangeable words. The last thing we wanted to make was a retro album. The last thing we wanted was an album that could be confused with something we did 35 years ago. What we wanted to capture was the spirit and vitality and the urgency and immediacy of the band today.
I remember when this album came out, I was like 10 years old. I remember flipping through CDs to the library and I saw this album and I had no idea it came out. I wasn't exactly keeping up with Classic Rock Magazine month by month back then, but I read through enough of those magazines to know that they said they'll never do a new studio record. So I was shocked and immediately told my mother I needed it. I went home, I listened to it, and as a young Kiss tard, I liked it. Not as much as the classics, but I did enjoy it. But much like with Psycho Circus, age brings wisdom because this album fucking sucks. This is such a perversion of 70s Kiss. When Alice Cooper went back to hard rock after decades of chasing trends, he did it much better than this. Nursery rhymes simple melodies, lyrics that are too dumb and basics for even still Panther, and such glossy and shiny production that makes Unmasked look like hotter than hell. Paul always talks about rock and roll having some piss and vinegar, but this is produced like an Avril Lavigne record. The guitars have no bite, I can hardly hear the bass, and when I can, it sounds like DI, and the vocals, Jesus Christ, Paul really started to deteriorate here. Apparently he had some surgery on his throat, and he didn't wait long enough to let his voice recover before going out on tour, and... woof. His voice breaks all the time and not in a cool way. And there's even some pretty obvious pitch correction. I know the Kiss cult, as well as many boomers who love classic rock, love to bash on modern bands and pop artists for having no talent and that they need auto-tune. Well, your god uses those same programs that Justin Bieber, Ariana Grande, you name it, uses. So maybe next time, don't act so high and mighty about not liking Chappelle Roan or Sabrina Carpenter. Gene still sounds pretty good though. I'm an Animal is a good track with some good riffs that are very Sabbath inspired, and it's cool to hear Gene sing a new Demon song. Tommy's solos are all Ace ripoffs, it's not even subtle. He's jacking his style so hard. And it's gotta be Paul and Gene telling him to do this. He never sounded exactly like Ace in Black and Blue. He even sings a song called When Lightning Strikes. Does it remind you of anything? It's actually one of the better songs, surprisingly enough. Good job, Tommy. Never Enough is a ripoff of Poison's Nothing But a Good Time. Stand is one of the lamest songs I've ever heard in my life. It reminds me of that Nickelback song, If Everyone Cared. Only Stand is actually a little worse because at least that Nickelback song seems to be about something. It's cheese, but not in a good way. This is stale mozzarella found in a packet of Lunchables. Danger Us, Yes I Know, Nobody's Perfect, Hot and Cold, and Russian Roulette are all dumber than any Spinal Tap song I've ever heard, and also less interesting to listen to at the same time. Best track is either Monday Delilah, the opener and lead single, it's a decent enough romp, if not a bit generic, and Say Yeah is an okay mid-tempo song with some classic Kiss energy, energy and a good hook. It's not amazing, but I'll take what I can get. Honestly, top 3 worst Kiss albums, at least. On the Shade might have had more shitty songs, but I liked more songs from that record than this one. If you have me looking back on Hot in the Shade like, perhaps I treated you too harshly, then you should immediately abort mission because you have supremely fucked up. I love how they tried to promote this album like, oh yeah, Paul's producing it himself. Well, it sounds like shit, so good job, Paul. Oh, no outside songwriters, no ballads. Well, maybe an outside songwriter or a ballad would be good for you guys. Desmond Child wouldn't let shit like Stand. Not to mention Destroyer is considered by many as the Kiss album. And look at that, we have both outside songwriters and fucking ballads. I don't care if this album was recorded on tape, I just wish you recorded good songs. So after 19 studio albums, 4 live records, 2 movies, and God knows how much drama, we are finally at the final studio Kiss album, released in the year of our Lord, 2012. Monster.
When you're in the studio making an album and you're looking at a computer screen, instead of a bunch of guys playing music, you're making a science experiment. What we did is we played in a room together, we wrote the songs together, we did it on analog tape, the way all the greats that we loved made their music, whether it was Motown, you listen to the Temptations doing Can't Get Next to You, you listen to the Four Tops, you listen to James Brown. It was music of passion. It wasn't music where everything was perfect, but that's what makes real rock and roll, so that's what we were going for.
Another record we can actually talk about it coming out. I don't really remember, guys. I was like 12. Come on, guys. I was just starting high school and getting into punk rock. I had enough on my plate. But my dad was keeping up with all that stuff, and he bought me the CD for that year's Christmas, and I absolutely hated it. Which, looking back, it's funny that that's the difference 3 years can make in a young kid's life. A kid hears the Ramones and the Misfits once, and it's all over for any other kind of music. Despite the reverence I still had for the classic albums, I never went back to this record until years later when I discovered Ralph Vieira's Kiss reviews, and he really praised this album despite hating Scab Kiss and Sonic Boom like I did. So I gave it another chance, and I'm not sure if I see the vision like you do, Ralph, but it's a decent record. Compared to Sonic Boom, it's undeniably better in almost every single way. The songwriting is tighter and nowhere near as generic, the sound is looser and not as sterile, and Tommy isn't ripping off Ace as much. His soul is much more reminiscent of the Black and Blue days, and the song he sings may be called Out of This World. I know, but it's actually a pretty great rock song. In fact, it's one of few Kiss songs to not be co-written by Paul or Gene. This is all Tommy. Guys, let him cook. The hooks and riffs are similar to Shock Me, but it's got its own vibe. Tommy doesn't have Ace's swagger, but he's got charisma of his own. Got an awesome pre-chorus, catchy melodies, a good helping of cheese, and a kick-ass solo. Seriously, Tommy, release a solo album. I'll give it a listen. It's too bad not many other songs match Tommy's Freak. Eric Singer's Awful Love of Rock and Roll is pretty awful, and Every Way Out of This World is endearing. The song was irritating. Eric may be a decent singer, but he does not have the sauce. His Take Me Down Below is a sex romp, and I do not need to hear the exploits of boomers who need to fuck. And Eat Your Heart Out makes me fucking wrench.
Eat your heart out, baby!
But there's other good songs. Back to the Stone Age is by far the best Gene song with one of his best screams of all time. Just fucking listen to it. Last Chance is a pretty good barn burner for a closer. There's a lot of energy in this track for a bunch of geriatrics. The only major bad thing is Paul's voice. In a few years removed from Sonic Boom, it's somehow gotten so much worse. It just absolutely shredded beyond repair. This is where we meet the Paul Stanley we know and know today. But he does have one standout on this album, barring his voice. Freak. It's a mid-tempo song with great hooks, lyrics, and God, actually having songs about stuff sounds great after Sonic Boom. It's about the Kiss Army, but it's also about being weird and being true to yourself. I'm a proud freak, and I don't trust anyone who isn't. I mean, look at me. I am no stranger to being stared at while out and about on the street. But if that's the price I gotta pay for being myself, I don't give a fuck. I spend enough of my life being bullied and belittled for how I look and how I am. You can take my nail polish and eyeliner from my cold dead hands. It really resonates with me, and it's probably as close to a Kiss classic as they can get to nowadays. But also a lot of this album sort of drags and doesn't quite hit. Hello Hallelujah is not bad. It has all the pieces to be a great Kiss song. I'm just not sure there is. There's just nothing behind the eyes, you know what I mean? I at least like half of the album, but the rest of it runs the gambit from mid to oh Jesus Christ. And for a band as inconsistent as Kiss, that's probably as good as one could expect for a band like this to end off their career with. It's not a bad record at all. Honestly, I think I was maybe too harsh on it in my Kiss Worst of Best years ago. But yeah, that's about all there is to the Kiss story besides all the drama. Trust me, I've read all the original guys' books at one point or another, and they're all divas. They were finally inducted to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2014, and Paul and Gene refused to perform live with Ace and Peter live, even for a one-off. But don't forget guys, they'll do anything for the fans. Though Bruce Kulick says Paul and Gene would have done it, but that the Hall of Fame were too strict with their rules. Whatever that means. Only the original 4 were inducted, which is lame, but it's the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Being lame is their whole shtick. But some cool things happened with Ace's solo output. First, Paul appeared on his first covers album, Origins Volume 1, with the cover of Fire and Water by Free.
Ace Frehley.
Boston.
How you doing, buddy?
I'm great.
Well, how long's it been?
Too many years.
Think we got it?
We still got it.
Let's do it.
I thought it actually sounded pretty good. He's singing a much lower register than he does in Kiss songs, and it doesn't sound bad at all, though there's a few moments that are a little suspect, but it's not enough to deter my enjoyment. It's a great version of a great song. Ace's solo is fantastic, and it can still bring it when he wants to. Both Paul and Ace pay tribute to both Paul Rodgers and Paul Kossoff while giving it their own identity. Some thought it might have led to an actual reunion, but I was never that naive, so I just enjoyed seeing those two guys share a stage again. Gene then co-wrote a couple songs and played bass on a track on Ace's solo album Spaceman. Ace even appeared on one of the Kiss cruises and actually played with the band acoustically. It was good to see them put the past behind them. Oh, never mind. The band announced their second farewell tour in 2019, the end of the road tour, and I just didn't care. I already saw them live once in 2008 at the Melbourne Grand Prix, and once on their tour with Motley Crue in 2013 at Marvel Stadium. And that show was honestly a little sad. The place was cut into less than a quarter, and even then it wasn't packed. The show itself is fine, I guess, but that was really all I needed to see of live Kiss. Once you've seen Kiss live once, you don't really need to see them again. The set list will always be pretty much the same. They're more than likely not going to throw out any deep cuts. The drums will always go up in the air, Paul will always fly into the audience, and Gene will always spit fire and blood. I later saw Ace live, open for Alice Cooper, and I was happy enough with that. I already wasn't going to go see them on their last tour, but then I saw allegations of Paul lip-syncing his live vocals. Yeah, it's pretty hard to defend. There's a lot of clips you can find online of Doobie's vocals flying out of Paul's voice when he's not even at the microphone, and it's pretty disappointing. I saw a lot of cope from the Kiss Defense Squad. Sebastian Bach even got mad at me on Twitter, so that was fun. I obviously understand having some things on backing tracks. Like if one song has keyboards, I think most people would understand having that played from a tape and not bringing a keyboardist on stage to play one song. But the live vocals is a bridge too far.
We're big proponents of tape, not on stage like a lot of other people.
And for a band who always pride themselves for the kind of shows they put on, it's a sad state of affairs.
When it came to them musically, Gene and I looked at each other and said, we'll kill them. He's just plain sweating.
I remember a few years ago, Gene himself went on a huge tirade against bands who lip sync on stage. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. I remember my sister saying she wanted to go see them, and when I told her that Paul's been lip syncing, she then had no interest. I told her that if she wanted to go, then I'll buy a ticket too, but she wasn't having it, so I didn't see the last tour, and I don't really mind, honestly. There are other bands who I love who I still have yet to see, so I'm not gonna lose sleep over not seeing Kiss a third time. They even teased having older members of the band join them on stage, likely just to drive up ticket sales, but there was no way they were going to get Peter and Ace on stage with them. How do I know this? Because Bruce Kulick was never even asked. If Bruce was never asked, the guy who's always in their corner and was always a nice guy to hang out with and was always pleasant to them, what chance did Peter, Ace, or God forbid Vinnie Vincent have? They have a better shot at getting Mark St. John on stage. And he's dead. And a pedophile. Besides that, Paul released another solo record with his band The Soul Station, or the Schlong Station as I call them, and as one could assume, it's covers of classic R&B and soul songs that Paul grew up on. And much like the Fire and Water cover, Paul sounds pretty good. Again, it's in lower registers, but it shows that despite losing so much of his voice, he still has a decent range when not belting out Kiss songs. His voice isn't completely shot. It just mostly is. And the album he put out, called Now and Then, I find to be quite enjoyable. He has a great band, and despite some studio fuckery they obviously used on his voice, Paul's in decent form for a guy old enough to be my grandpa pop.
Child, things will get brighter. Someday, yeah, we'll get it together and we'll get it all done. Someday, when your head is much lighter.
Kiss performed their last ever gig at Madison Square Garden in late 2023, and it was kind of rough, I can't lie. If Paul wasn't lip syncing anymore, I think he should have, because he sounded worse than ever. His voice wasn't just shot, it's been hit with an RPG. It's eviscerated, there's nothing left. He can't even do his stage raps anymore, man. It's... ugh.
I'm talking about Dr. Love!
Hell, even the band themselves sounded kind of sloppy. It just wasn't good by any metric. The setlist also sucked shit. It was just another Kiss show. No surprises, no nothing. Even Bruce Kulick, who's the most diplomatic guy I've ever seen, wasn't too kind, and he's right. How do you not even mention not only him, but Eric Carr, or Ace and Peter? Pitiful. And then the Kiss avatars. You know, I'd say I'm surprised, but I'm really not. But at least the band were finally over. Oh wait.
Hey guys. I hate to make this video any longer, but this was filmed about 2 months ago. On October 16th, we lost the one and only Ace Frehley. He had a nasty fall which left him in a coma for 2 weeks until his family decided to finally let him pass on. He was surrounded by friends, family, and love as he went into the cosmos. He'll be remembered for decades to come as a pioneering legend who pushed the guitar forward. He is singularly responsible for more people picking up the guitar than maybe anyone else. I mean, look at me. Look at what I surround myself with. I've had a Kiss poster adorn my wall in so many of my videos over the years, and that is all thanks to Ace and that little band he formed with Peter, Paul, and Gene. I won't go on any further as I've said my piece within this video, all of which was filmed and a lot of it was edited before he passed. So I'll let James from a couple months back play us out. Safe travel, Space Ace. We miss y'all already.
But that's Kiss. Through 5 decades, they're an absolute juggernaut. They're my first favorite band, and they'll always mean so much to me. Despite all the shit I've talked, despite me not going to their last tour, despite everything, when I sit down and listen to records like Alive, Harder Than Hell, The Debut, Rock and Roll Over, Dynasty, Creatures, you name it, I'm still that little shit watching Kiss on VHS, either glued to the screen or rocking out with my little fucking tennis racket. They're what made me want to play music and play guitar, play bass, sing. They were the springboard for me turning out the way I am. You can blame them, I guess. I don't know what my life would be like without them. Those classic records are in my DNA at this point. I'm not kidding, if it wasn't for Kiss, I don't know if I would even make videos like this. They were the first domino for me, man. So this is for Kiss, the band that influenced me more than anybody else. They're responsible for the way my life has gone. Those bastards. For a long time in my youth, Kiss were the only band that mattered. And to an extent, in a weird way, that's still kinda true. I'm glad to put all this time and effort into a video like this, which is mostly a tribute. Despite my bitching. I wouldn't bitch this much about a band that I didn't deeply care for. So this is for Vinnie Vincent, Mark St. John, Bruce Kulick, Tommy Thayer, Eric Singer, Eric Carr, and of course, the original 4. Peter Criss, Ace Frehley, Gene Simmons, and Paul Stanley. You guys have changed my life in more ways than you'll ever know. So thank you, and good night. Take it easy, party people.
There was a time where an audience thought that they were lucky to be at a concert, and they were lucky that you would play for them. And we got on stage and said, we are lucky that you are here.
We're probably the luckiest sons of bitches who ever walked the face of the planet, and probably don't deserve anywhere near the kind of loyalty that we get from our fans. But Kiss fans started calling themselves the Kiss Army. It's beyond songs or beyond a rock and roll band. Some other social thing has happened because of that.
It's everything you could ever want, and anything you ever thought that rock and roll could be and beyond is what Kiss is. Because Kiss isn't a moment, and Kiss isn't a fad, and it's not this year's trend. It is a life, and it not only takes in the 4 of us, but our family is millions, and it's around the world, and it's something that sometimes just leaves me speechless. There's nothing that comes close to it.
Turn around. Look, it's rock and roll.